Here's our patch. Each patch, as you may know, is individually designed by the crew. Our mission really began with the completion of the service module after a 2-year delay, and here it is during the rollout ceremony in Russia. It was launched in July on top of a Proton rocket. And it rendezvoused and docked with the rest of the space station, which again had already been in orbit for over 2 years.
The 9-year mission of the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory will come to an end over the weekend. NASA plans to redirect the spacecraft into Earth's atmosphere early on Sunday. It had tremendous successes detecting gamma rays, but one of the spacecraft's controlling devices failed last year. NASA says it has no choice now but to end the mission. Debris from the controlled re-entry is expected to fall into a remote area of the Pacific Ocean. NASA says it plans to webcast the re-entry live. Earlier, the space agency announced its partnership with a high-tech startup, making the live coverage possible. CNN's Greg Lefebvre has more on the deal.
Space may not be for sale, but the pictures soon will be. NASA teams up with a Silicon Valley multimedia company to market the agency's images, and in the process, its image.
We are going to have the very best in multimedia. We are going to bring space into everyone's soul and heart and home.
High-tech startup Dreamtime will spend $100 million to put high-definition video cameras on future space flights and on board the International Space Station. High-def video on high-speed internet computer lines will create a virtual ride-along experience for astronaut wannabes.
How wonderful and special it is to fly in space. But there's always a sad tang behind it, and that is that we can't bring other people with us.
The high-definition cameras are so sharp they'll track experiments and conduct maintenance inspections in space, eliminating some spacewalks, reducing risk. NASA gets no money from the deal, but will likely save in photography and video production costs.
The taxpayers are, in a sense here, getting a return on their investment, okay? But it's a return that is through cost avoidance.
Dreamtime will post millions of NASA video frames on the internet and create a NASA-focused internet site. It will copy and catalog the millions of air and space archives dating back to the biplane era.
We currently have 40,000 hours of video, 10 million feet of film, 10 million still photos.
All the NASA files will be posted free on the internet in standard form. The high-definition stuff will cost. That's where Dreamtime hopes to make its money. If this venture succeeds, one of NASA's benefits will be something money cannot buy: goodwill. With more images and faster access, the backers say they want to make space cool again. Greg Lefebvre, CNN, Mountain View, California.
Bill Clinton must soon decide whether to build a missile defense system designed to protect this country from a small-scale nuclear missile attack. The initial price tag, about $30 billion. A critical milestone comes on Friday, when the U.S. military will attempt to destroy a mock warhead in space. It's an ambitious goal, an expensive program, and a little difficult to explain. Our coverage begins with CNN military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon. Jamie?
Well, Bernie, after one hit last year and one miss this year, the Pentagon will try again for a third time to destroy a warhead in space. After tomorrow night's attempt, in which a mock warhead will be launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, and an interceptor from a small island in the Pacific, the Pentagon will give a report card to President Clinton grading the $30 billion project in two crucial areas: cost and technical feasibility. A success will increase pressure on President Clinton, who's under a congressional mandate to deploy a missile defense as soon as it's technically feasible. It would be a limited system, 100 interceptor missiles based in Alaska that in theory would be capable of protecting all 50 states from a small-scale attack. Today's concept is far more modest than the Strategic Defense Initiative proposed by President Reagan in the 1980s. Dubbed Star Wars, it was conceived as a system of space-based lasers that would defend against a massive attack from the Soviet Union. Now, in order to get Russia to amend the ABM treaty, the United States is trying to convince Moscow that the current plan is aimed at emerging threats like Iraq and North Korea and would be of little use against the vast Russian nuclear arsenal. The goal is deployment of the system by 2005, about the same time U.S. intelligence estimates North Korea might have a missile capable of reaching the United States. And for all the hoopla surrounding this third test, in the end, President Clinton can only decide whether to build the missile shield now or later, because Congress has mandated that hit or miss, development will continue. Bernie?
Thank you, Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon. Judy.
CNN's Jim Hill is at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, where an intercontinental missile with a dummy warhead is scheduled to be launched. Jim?
That's right. Sometime between 24 and 30 hours from now here at Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is along the California coast, roughly 120 miles north of Los Angeles, there will be the first part of the test launch. Now, this will involve a Minuteman II rocket. On board will be the fake warhead, along with a large Mylar balloon, which is going to act as a decoy during the test. Now, once that missile is launched sometime between 7 o'clock and 11 o'clock Friday evening Pacific time, it will climb to high altitude, traveling at about 15,000 miles an hour as it heads out over the Pacific Ocean. Now, about 10 minutes after that launch, a second missile will be launched from the atoll in the Marshall Islands. That's roughly 5,000 miles from the Vandenberg launch point. Now, that missile will have on board the so-called exo-atmospheric kill vehicle. This is the vehicle that is being tested, its job to intercept and destroy the mock warhead. In order to do this, it will use information from an orbiting satellite as well as ground-based radar. It will also use some sophisticated infrared sensing gear on board its own warhead, or strike vehicle, if you will, to hone in on this dummy warhead. It must also identify the warhead from the decoy, come in and destroy the warhead. If all goes well, it will do so. It did that in one test, missed it in another. Now, this is somewhat controversial. There are protesters here from the Greenpeace organization. They've also launched a ship into the Pacific to be in an area which is supposed to be cordoned off. All of this to protest what they see as really an escalation of the arms race. Judy, back to you.
All right, Jim Hill reporting from California. Bernie?
A decision by the U.S. to build a missile defense system would have serious global consequences. Some U.S. allies fear the development of such a system could spark a new arms race. For that, we turn to CNN State Department correspondent Andrea Koppel.
Bernie, from Beirut to Beijing, the refrain from U.S. allies and strategic competitors alike has been a resounding no to possible plans to build a limited missile defense. The loudest and potentially most damaging opposition comes from the Kremlin. Russia's new president, Vladimir Putin, isn't buying the U.S. position that there is a real threat from countries like North Korea and Iraq, and is still refusing to consider amending a 1972 arms control treaty to allow the U.S. to put up missile interceptors. Next in line, China's leaders. On Friday, the same day of the third U.S. test, a senior U.S. point man on arms control will be in Beijing to discuss this very issue. Beijing believes it could be the real target of this U.S. missile defense system because its arsenal is so small. It only has 24 ballistic missiles. However, many both within and outside the Clinton administration believe this is just a convenient excuse for Beijing to move forward with developing more ballistic missiles of its own. Finally, the feeling among many of the United States allies, Great Britain, Germany, France, is fear. Fear that it could trigger an arms race with Russia and China and potentially decouple or separate Europe's defense from the United States. You can bet all will be watching tomorrow night's test with bated breath. Bernie?
Andrea Koppel.
2 rockets will blast off in an operation to see if it's technically possible to knock out enemy missiles in space. One of the test rockets will be launched from an atoll in the Pacific. And the group Greenpeace is positioning a ship in an area of California where a rocket stage is expected to splash down. The group is hoping to interfere with the test, but officials say it will proceed. Greenpeace is opposed to nuclear weapons programs, and it fears development of an anti-missile system will spark a new arms race. CNN military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre reports the test is to be the last before a recommendation is made to the U.S. president on the program's future.
Liftoff. Stand by for promotion.
If about 1,000 things go right, here's how the third intercept test will work. From Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, a modified Minuteman missile carries a mock warhead and a balloon decoy into space. As soon as U.S. spy satellites detect the launch, an interceptor missile armed with a warhead-busting payload called a kill vehicle is fired from the Kwajalein Atoll in the Pacific. Navigating by the stars and guided by powerful ground radars, the non-explosive device seeks out the warm target in the cold of space, using sophisticated computer algorithms and thermal sensors to discriminate between the warhead and the decoy balloon. When the two objects collide at more than 12,000 miles per hour, the result will be space dust. That's what happened in the first test last October, although critics called it a lucky shot, arguing the decoy actually helped the interceptor find its target. A second test in January missed by a few hundred feet when, at the last second, a thermal sensor malfunctioned. The Pentagon says it's not a matter of developing new technology, but rather getting extremely complicated existing technology to work.
You look back at a typical missile development program, not as complex as this, and we had lots of failures before we had lots of successes.
The test is elaborately choreographed and controlled to keep down the variables. For instance, only a single balloon decoy is being used, not the dozens of balloons critics say could easily defeat the system. And the mock warhead will have a tracking beacon. But Pentagon officials insist that does not mean the test is rigged.
That beacon does not help the kill vehicle in the acquisition phase of that requirement. It is only for this radar here. And this radar is a surrogate using the same type of data we would get from this into our battle manager.
The feeling among Pentagon rocket scientists is that the risk is not so much that missile defense won't ever work, but that it won't be working in 5 years as promised. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, the Pentagon.
Director of the National Missile Defense Joint Program Office.
Following the same arc as the two previous tests.
Well, the essence is that we're trying to demonstrate in this test the functionality of the system. And knowing ahead of time what the trajectory is allows us to understand what the truth data is and where it's going, so we can compare truth data to what we actually measure in this system. And as we move along, we'll be changing those variables as we get into later and later tests.
Next question. Carrie.
As you're leading up to the test in the final ground checkout over the last couple of days, any problems crop up with the IR seeker or any issues with the target payload?
No,
or the payload
none.
Or anything?
No, all the issues have been put to bed for the flight test.
Yes, sir. Over here, blue shirt.
In the different fact sheets and on the press conference at Pentagon a couple weeks ago, it was said that this is a more demanding test than IFT-4 or IFT-3. My understanding, the only thing that's really different is that you're going to use the new prototype communication system to uplink targeting information. What else is actually different? Is it an incremental difference, or is it an actual major difference between IFT-4 and IFT-5?
Essentially is the incremental difference of putting the in-flight interceptor communication system to do those last two uplinks, in which that'll actually guide the EKV to the target. So it's the end game that's or the communication that's changing for this flight test.
Yes, sir.
Does your weather remain favorable for launch on schedule tonight? And what effect, if any, would a ship sailing into the restricted zone downrange have on launching the test on schedule?
The weather remains good for the launch window. As far as the any ship coming into the area, you'll have to ask the Vandenberg Public Affairs Officer about that. He's handling that area. Yes.
Can you just do the last-minute checklist, what you're checking before launch, and then the timeline as far as what's supposed to happen and when?
What we're doing at this end is going through essentially the target on the Vandenberg side is squibing the batteries, getting it powered up out of Kwajalein. It's a similar checklist to make sure that everything and all the instrumentation is working properly. And then as far as the flight test, the target is launched about 10 minutes ahead of the interceptor, which then goes out of Kwaj, and then you get the intercept.
At what point do they collide? Does that occur? Because I know that the kill is being launched from 4,000 miles away.
It's about 600 kilometers north of Kwajalein is where the intercept will occur at about 200 kilometers altitude. And that's where they'll collide. North of Kwajalein. Yes.
How long will it take before we know whether it's hit or missed the target?
We'll know. Essentially, we have it down to we know where it should hit, and the timing of it, and then from the instrumentation or truth data that we get, we'll know whether or not we got the indications of a hit or not. And then there'll just be a look at the post data to see what functionality was actually accomplished during the whole test. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Your tests, I believe 19 scheduled tests, correct, want to test incrementally certain systems. And in that regard, they've been criticized as not being real-world tests. In terms of what you're testing on this particular launch, how close is that to the big picture, a real-world scenario?
The scenario, as I mentioned earlier, does represent, in what we call our design 2 scenarios, at least one possibility, one type of scenario. As far as the elements, they are prototypical, they are representative. The radar out of Kwajalein, the GBRP, is a representation of the X-band radar, just at shorter range, but it's the same type of radar. The radar that's going to be used on the West Coast for the initial tracking is typical of the upgraded early warning radar that we use. The kill vehicle is very close to the tactical representation. The booster that we're using out at Kwajalein is a prototype. It is not the tactical booster, but that would come in later tests. So as we move down through these next series of tests, we're going to incrementally be upgrading the software that would be used in the tactical system, the tactical booster itself, and actually changing some of the targets as we move down to IOC, or when the system is operational. Yes.
At what point do you start, and they say some of these countries like Korea can put up a missile with multiple warheads and multiple decoys. At what point do you start putting up missiles with multiple warheads and multiple decoys?
That's something that we would have to look at in the future for the flight tests. And that's something that we would have to get out of the intelligence community as to the probability that they would actually do that. Yes.
Is there any indication that any of these states of concern actually have the technology to launch a missile to the United States?
That's something you'll have to ask the intelligence community. Yes.
Man, but
There's a missile. Is it automatically launched by detection of the one that's being launched from here? Or is there somebody on the other side with a radar that indicates that a missile is coming and then that person launches it? How does that end of it work?
What happens is that there's a detection of the missile launch at the Vandenberg end by satellite. It cues the system, which then sends a message downrange through what we call the BMC cubed, or Battle Management Command and Control System. And that activates the readiness for the interceptor to be launched. It loads in the data that the missile system and the radar see.
So there's no human interaction at that point?
Keith Englander, who is the technical director for the National Missile Defense Joint Program, describing how in the next few hours there will be a missile sent up from the so-called Kwajalein Atoll in the Pacific, aiming at a missile that will be fired 10 minutes before that from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. Let's go now to the Pentagon, to CNN's military affairs correspondent, Jamie McIntyre. Jamie, how important is this test today to U.S. plans to go ahead with a missile defense system?
Well, it's an important test because so far the United States has had one hit and one miss, and although you couldn't tell it from the low-key presentation there from one of the project technical managers, Keith Englander, they're pretty optimistic that tonight they're going to go ahead and hit this target in a fairly controlled test because the last miss was caused by really a fluke leak in a cooling system that they're pretty sure that they've corrected, and they think they're crossing their fingers they'll hit tonight. Now, that will create some pressure on President Clinton, who is under pressure from conservatives in Congress to move ahead quickly with building a national missile defense system. So if there is a hit, that will certainly add some momentum to that. However, there are 16 more tests, and there are still lots of technical problems to be solved. And at this point, the president will have to take into account all of the factors involved, not just the technical feasibility, but also the cost, which is at least $30 billion, perhaps as much as $60 billion for this system, and the threat from other countries like North Korea, which now says it's suspended its missile program, even though it tested a longer-range missile 2 years ago, and also the effect on international arms control agreements and relations the United States has, not just with Russia and China, but its own allies who are against deployment of a system like this at this time. So the president will wrap all of those factors up in the fall and decide whether he wants to start building the system now or leave that decision to the next president who takes office after January 20th. Judy?
All right, CNN's Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon as the moment grows closer for this attempt to kill a missile by another missile. And CNN will, of course, report the results just as soon as they are available. Worldview coming up next.
Controversial defense program in the United States has suffered a major setback. The third test of a national missile defense interceptor failed to hit its target in space over the Pacific Ocean. The anti-missile weapon was launched in an attempt to shoot down an approaching dummy warhead. Pentagon officials say they still need to analyze the data.
What it tells me is we have more engineering work to do. And as we've said all along, this is a very difficult, challenging job. This is rocket science, so there's a lot of things that could happen in this process. In this particular case, it appears it happened in an area that has little to do with the functionality of the key component of the system that we're testing.
The failure is raising the possibility of a substantial delay in the Pentagon's timetable of having a national anti-missile defense system ready for use by the end of 2005.
Über dem Pazifik ist heute Morgen ein Abwehrtest gescheitert, weil eine Rakete die andere verfehlte. Das Pentagon stellte fest, mit dem Fehlschlag werde das NMD-Programm nicht in Frage gestellt. Weitere Tests sollen im Herbst folgen. International wird befürchtet, dass das Raketenabwehrprogramm ein neues Wettrüsten auslösen könnte.
Mit dem Start in Kalifornien beginnt ein komplexes Manöver. Die Testrakete soll einen Angriff simulieren. Ziel ist es, diesen in der Luft abzuwehren. Die dazu 20 Minuten später gestartete Abfangrakete verfehlt ihr Ziel. Im All hätte sie das mutmaßliche Angriffsobjekt zerstören sollen. Anders als in der Simulation flogen die Objekte mit einer Geschwindigkeit von mehr als 20.000 Kilometern pro Stunde aneinander vorbei. Ein solcher Test kostet rund $100 Millionen. Zunächst ist von Signalfehlern als Ursache die Rede. Dazu äußert sich das US-Verteidigungsministerium nicht. Das Scheitern der heutigen Mission stelle das Gesamtprojekt nicht in Frage. Bereits im Herbst sollen weitere Tests folgen. Die misslungene Operation nicht nur ein technischer Fehlschlag. Auch politisch scheint das Projekt kaum noch durchsetzbar. Für die Militärpraxis dürfte das neue Raketenabwehrsystem in weite Ferne gerückt sein. Moskau und Peking sind erleichtert über das Scheitern. Hier hatten die Raketentests heftigen Widerspruch provoziert. Das Gleichgewicht des Schreckens, das bisher einen Atomkrieg verhindert habe, werde empfindlich gestört. Außerdem könnte das amerikanische Abwehrsystem einen neuen Rüstungswettlauf in Gang setzen. Insgesamt planen die USA ein System mit 100 Abfangraketen. Die kosten $36 Milliarden. Die Schaulustigen in Kalifornien Augenzeugen eines kostspieligen Experiments.
Its defense program on its third test, a national missile defense interceptor, failed to hit its target in space over the Pacific Ocean. The anti-missile weapon attempted to destroy an approaching dummy warhead, but Pentagon officials say what is called the kill vehicle never separated from the rocket booster.
What it tells me is we have more engineering work to do. And as we've said all along, this is a very difficult, challenging job. This is rocket science, so there's a lot of things that could happen in this process. In this particular case, it appears it happened in an area that has little to do with the functionality of the key component of the system that we're testing.
The failure is raising the possibility of a substantial delay in the Pentagon's timetable of having a national anti-missile defense system ready for use by the end of the year 2005. U.S. President Bill Clinton has not given the go-ahead yet.
Die USA haben bei ihrem umstrittenen Projekt für ein nationales Raketenabwehrprogramm einen Rückschlag erlitten. Erneut misslang ein Test, bei dem das System eine Fernraketenattrappe abfangen sollte. Das ist bereits der zweite Fehlschlag von bislang 3 Versuchen.
Alles hatte so schön funktioniert im Trickfilm. Für den Fall der Fälle beim Angriff einer Langstreckenrakete tritt der neue Flugkörper in Aktion. Ein hochpräzises Radarsystem ortet das gegnerische Geschoss. Das mit einer Trägerrakete losgeschickte Killervehikel steuert sein Ziel an und zerstört es. Die Realität beim Test sah dann allerdings ganz anders aus. Die Killerrakete löste sich erst gar nicht und dann gab es auch noch Probleme mit einem als Täuschung dienenden Ballon. Das Ganze ein Fehlschlag. Ernste und enttäuschte Gesichter im Pentagon. Wir hatten den Test schon wegen eines technischen Defekts um 2 Stunden verschieben müssen, erklärt Generalleutnant Kadish. Das Killervehikel funktionierte nicht richtig, konnte sein Ziel nicht zerstören, offenbar ein Signalfehler. Die amerikanischen Pläne, vor allem in China, sorgen sie für Angst und Ärger. Das System, sagt dieser Mann, zerstört das Gleichgewicht in der Welt und könnte der Start zu einem neuen Wettrüsten sein. Auch die Zeitungen hier sind voll mit Artikeln über die amerikanische Raketenabwehr. In die Kritik dürfte sich nun auch Genugtuung über den fehlgeschlagenen Test mischen.
Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren. Die Pläne der USA für ein neues Raketenabwehrsystem haben einen Rückschlag erlitten. In der vergangenen Nacht ist erneut ein Test gescheitert. Vom kalifornischen Stützpunkt Vandenberg wurde eine Sprengkopfattrappe gestartet, die wenig später über dem Pazifik von einer radargelenkten Abwehrrakete zerstört werden sollte. Deren Steuerung hat aber nicht funktioniert. Damit ist unsicher, ob US-Präsident Clinton wie geplant im Herbst über das neue System entscheidet.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Jim Clancy at the CNN Center, and this is World News. It aimed to prove that incoming ballistic missiles could be intercepted and destroyed in space. But the third test of a U.S. missile defense system missed that target completely. Critics say development of the program will escalate the arms race. CNN's military affairs correspondent Jamie McIntyre reports the complete failure of the test failed to yield any critical data. But that may not cause the U.S. to cancel this project.
After a minor problem with a battery, the target missile took flight 2 hours late from Vandenberg Air Force Base. At the Pentagon, anxious officials watched in a secure command center as the interceptor missile was launched from the Kwajalein Atoll in the Pacific Ocean to go after the mock warhead. Within minutes, Missile Defense Director Lieutenant General Ronald Kadish gets the bad news by phone that the warhead-busting kill vehicle failed to separate from its second-stage rocket motor.
Our radar sensors say that we didn't get the kill vehicle separation.
The disappointment is palpable as the realization sinks in that not only did the third test fail, it failed before any of the crucial systems could be tested. And the problem was with a substitute booster rocket that is due to be replaced after a few more tests.
It wasn't even on my list. We had good confidence in the reliability of this. It's worked very well before, and to have the kill vehicle not separate was not something we worried about.
There was another failure. A balloon decoy on the target missile didn't inflate. So the $100 million test produced almost no useful data to help President Clinton decide if it's time to start building the $30 billion system.
I would say we didn't get the data we had hoped to have. The question of whether it's an absolute need or not is the one that the Secretary and the President will be deciding on.
One small success, the X-band radar that's designed to see into space and tell the difference between warheads and decoys worked fine. That's how engineers knew the decoy balloon didn't inflate. But that did little to ease the sting of a major malfunction.
What it tells me is we have more engineering work to do.
Despite this latest failure, it's possible the Pentagon could still recommend beginning work on a radar for the system on a remote Alaskan island. But critics will argue the system remains unproven, and some officials here concede that the goal of having a missile shield ready to go by 2005 appears to have been dealt a major setback. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, the Pentagon.
As we've reported, the U.S. anti-missile defense system has many critics, including Russia and China. Beijing reacted to the failure of the system's third test, as we hear now from CNN's Rebecca McKinnon.
The failed interceptor test is giving China hope that U.S. plans for a national missile defense shield will be scrapped. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says national missile defense is out of step with world trends. Saturday's headlines screamed, NMD will disrupt the global nuclear balance. Hoping to preserve that balance, U.S. Chief Arms Control Negotiator John Hullum has just wrapped up a round of non-proliferation talks in Beijing. The U.S. and China did not see eye to eye over U.S. concerns that China is aiding Pakistan's missile program, but Hullum said the Clinton administration wants to keep talking and avoid sanctions.
The objective of our policy and of, in fact, the sanctions legislation is not sanctions. The objective is solutions, and that's what we're interested in working on.
China is beefing up its own missile arsenal directed at Taiwan. Since China conducted missile exercises near Taiwan in 1996, the island Beijing considers Chinese territory has sought increased military assistance from Washington to guard against Chinese attack. But Beijing told U.S. negotiators this week it won't accept any moves by Washington to include Taiwan in U.S. plans for a theater missile defense system in Asia known as TMD. But Hullum said the U.S. isn't making any promises.
We don't rule out the possibility that sometime in the future, Taiwan may have TMD capabilities. We may assist Taiwan, but we haven't made that decision.
When it comes to U.S. efforts to protect its own territory from intercontinental missiles, Washington insists national missile defense is not designed to ward off Chinese missiles, an argument Chinese diplomats say they still find hard to believe. Rebecca McKinnon, CNN, Beijing.
Russia says the failed test bolsters its argument that the proposed U.S. anti-missile shield won't work. They say it's not safe and that it would disrupt the military balance of power.
A national anti-ballistic missile system that would secure absolute protection from a large quantity, hundreds of ballistic missiles. The creation of such a system is highly problematic, and in my opinion, it's impossible.
Some of Russian officials are saying that they hope that this failed test will now convince the United States to abandon the program.
US-Raketenabwehr. Im Weltraum über dem Pazifik ist auch der dritte Versuch gescheitert, den Sprengkopf einer Atomrakete abzufangen. Das Verteidigungsministerium in Washington teilte mit, das Abwehrprojektil habe sich nicht von der Trägerrakete getrennt. Präsident Clinton will nach einem weiteren Test im Herbst über die Weiterentwicklung des umstrittenen Verteidigungsprogramms entscheiden.
Das Raketenabwehrsystem der USA hat in der vergangenen Nacht einen schweren Rückschlag erlitten. Ein wichtiger Test, der die Zerstörung von herannahenden Atomsprengköpfen im Weltall simulieren sollte, schlug über dem Pazifik fehl. Dass die USA diesen Test überhaupt durchgeführt haben, stieß in Russland und China auf scharfe Kritik. Ob das Projekt nun in Frage steht, ist nicht klar. Aus den USA berichtet Carsten Schmidt.
Dies war das geplante Ziel. Eine Interkontinentalrakete mit einer Bombenattrappe bestückt, die vom kalifornischen Luftwaffenstützpunkt Vandenberg abgeschossen wurde. 21 Minuten später, 8000 Kilometer entfernt, stieg im Pazifik die Abfangrakete auf. Sie sollte den feindlichen Testsprengkörper aufspüren und zerstören, so wie in dieser Animation. Doch ein Telefonanruf im Pentagon verursachte lange Gesichter bei den US-Militärs. Der $100 Millionen teure Test schlug fehl. Und das nicht zum ersten Mal. Nur bei einem von bislang 3 Tests gelang es im vergangenen Oktober tatsächlich, die feindliche Rakete unschädlich zu machen. Es ist halt Raketenwissenschaft, da kann viel passieren, sagt Generalleutnant Kaddish. Doch auch er weiß, der misslungene Test ist ein herber Rückschlag. Kritiker im eigenen Land fühlen sich nun bestätigt, dass das Milliarden-Dollar-Projekt Geldverschwendung sei. Und im Ausland haben die Tests selbst die europäischen Verbündeten verärgert, die ein neues Wettrüsten befürchten. Präsident Clinton muss nun bald entscheiden, ob tatsächlich bis zum Jahre 2005 das umstrittene Raketenschutzschild aufgebaut werden soll. Der für den Herbst geplante nächste Test wird vermutlich wegen des erneuten Fehlschlags zunächst einmal verschoben.
Die Nachrichten des Tages, heute mit Klaus-Peter Siegloch.
Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Für viele Amerikaner ist es ein Prestigeprojekt. Kein Staat der Erde soll die USA mit einer Rakete treffen können. Doch der Abwehrschirm, den Washington dafür installieren will, hat in der vergangenen Nacht schon wieder versagt. Der Versuch, eine Angreiferrakete mit einer anderen abzufangen und im Weltraum zu zerstören, scheiterte. Freude über den Fehlschlag gab es nicht nur in Moskau. Die USA waren auch von Verbündeten für diesen neuen Krieg der Sterne kritisiert worden.
Vandenberg, Kalifornien. Die Angreiferrakete in diesem Manöver bringt die Sprengkopfattrappe auf den Weg. Eine halbe Stunde später soll sie von einem sogenannten Killer-Vehikel aufgespürt werden. Das wird von Satelliten, Rechnern und Mini-Raketen an Bord auf Kollisionskurs gesteuert. So sollte es jedenfalls sein. Die Trägerrakete startet pünktlich von einem Pazifikatoll. Doch zum kompliziertesten Teil des Tests, ob das Zerstörungsvehikel den Angreifer tatsächlich trifft, kommt es gar nicht. Das Abfanggeschoss, Kernstück der geplanten Raketenabwehr, löst sich nicht von der Trägerrakete, eine 100 Millionen Dollar Pleite. Im Pentagon sitzen sie wie gelähmt. General Kaddish nimmt die Hiobsbotschaft entgegen. Keine Trennung des Killer-Vehikels von der Rakete, aus. Für die Militärs, die Rüstungsindustrie und starke politische Fraktionen in Washington ist das eine Nacht bitterer Enttäuschung. Der zweite von bisher 3 Versuchen gescheitert. Ob, wie geplant, im Herbst der 4. stattfindet, ist jetzt ungewiss. Später, nach dem ersten Schock, muss der General die Öffentlichkeit informieren. So ist Raketentechnik. So viele Risiken hat man bedacht und dann passieren Dinge, die man nicht für möglich gehalten hätte.
Ich begrüße unsere Korrespondenten in Washington und bei der NATO in Brüssel. Eberhard Pilz, Präsident Clinton dürfte der Scheiter doch gar nicht so ungelegen kommen. Könnte das auch schon das Aus für das Projekt bedeuten?
Nun, Präsident Clinton hat sich bisher nicht öffentlich geäußert dazu, heute jedenfalls nicht. Das Aus, glaube ich, kann man noch nicht sagen. Es wird mit Sicherheit noch weiter diskutiert werden. Es wird eine Verschiebung geben. Die ganze Unternehmung wird erneut auf den Prüfstand gestellt werden. Aber von einem Aus kann noch nicht die Rede sein. Dazu sind die Interessen, die dahinter stehen, strategisch, auch militärrüstungstechnische Interessen und politische Interessen zu groß. Der Kongress hatte ja den Präsidenten im vergangenen Jahr beauftragt, ein solches Raketenabwehrsystem zu installieren, mit dem Zusatz, sobald es technisch möglich ist. Dieser Zusatz kommt jetzt natürlich zum Tragen. Es ist offensichtlich technisch noch nicht möglich. Das heißt also, Präsident Clinton wird seine Entscheidung, die für den Herbst vorhergesehen war, mit Sicherheit noch etwas hinauszögern. Und das heißt, dass er in seiner Amtszeit diese Entscheidung nun wohl mit Sicherheit nicht mehr treffen wird, sondern seinem Nachfolger überlassen muss.
Klaus Prömpers, die europäischen NATO-Verbündeten hatten Washington ja schon gewarnt, das Wettrüsten nicht wieder zu beginnen. Gibt es dort jetzt so eine Art klammheimliche Freude?
Das vielleicht nicht, aber doch ein gewisses Aufatmen, denn man glaubt in Europa damit Zeit gewonnen zu haben. Zum einen Zeit gewonnen zu haben, um weiter mit den Amerikanern zu sprechen und mit ihnen zu verhandeln, ob das wirklich alles in das ABM-Paket passt, was bisher zwischen Amerikanern und Russen gilt. Und zum zweiten Zeit gewonnen zu haben, um mit den Russen detaillierter zu verhandeln, was sie beim letzten amerikanisch-russischen Gipfel angeboten hatten, nämlich ein Raketenschutzschild für Europa. Ob das nun realisierbar ist, weiß ja auch noch kein Mensch und man erwartet immer noch detaillierte Vorgaben der Russen, um darüber diskutieren zu können. Aufatmen ein bisschen, weil man Zeit gewonnen hat, aber man rechnet in Europa nicht damit, dass die Amerikaner von diesem Projekt gänzlich ablassen. In Europa rechnet man sogar damit, dass die Amerikaner demnächst die ersten Vorarbeiten in Angriff nehmen.
Danke nach Brüssel und Washington.
Hier ist das erste deutsche Fernsehen mit der Tagesschau.
Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Die Pläne der USA für ein neues Raketenabwehrsystem haben einen herben Rückschlag erlitten. Auch der zweite Test in diesem Jahr ist gescheitert. Dabei sollte eine Rakete mit einer Sprengkopfattrappe über dem Pazifik von einem radargelenkten Geschoss abgefangen werden. Wie das Pentagon mitteilte, löste sich dieses Geschoss nicht von der Trägerrakete. Nach diesem zweiten Fehlschlag ist unsicher, ob Präsident Clinton im Herbst eine Grundsatzentscheidung für das neue Raketenabwehrsystem trifft.
Vandenberg Air Force Base, nördlich von Los Angeles. Es sollte die Nacht werden, in der der Raketenschutzschild seine Tauglichkeit beweist. Von amerikanischem Boden aus wurde ein simulierter Angriff gestartet auf ein US-Atoll im Südpazifik. 20 Minuten später startet dort eine Abfangrakete, die den Angreifer aus dem Himmel schießen soll. Eine Gewehrkugel mit einer Gewehrkugel treffen, ist der Slogan der Raketenbauer. So sollte es funktionieren. Hightech-Sensoren erfassen die angreifende Rakete gegen den kalten Hintergrund des Weltraums. Das Abfanggeschoss lenkt sich in einer Selbstmordaktion gegen den Feind. Im Kontrollzentrum des Pentagon. Es ist der dritte entscheidende Test. Der letzte ist schiefgegangen, heute Nacht brauchen sie Erfolg. Schon nach Minuten ist klar, dass es nicht funktioniert hat. Statt einer Kollision, Schweigen im Weltraum. Wahrscheinlich war es ein relativ kleines Problem. Der eigentliche Abfangkopf hat sich nie aus der Rakete gelöst. Seine Fähigkeiten konnten gar nicht erst getestet werden. Der Chef des Raketenabwehrprogramms versucht, gute Miene zum schlechten Ergebnis zu machen. Wir wissen nicht, ob es geklappt hätte, sagt er. Die letzte Nacht beweist nur, dass wir weiter testen müssen. Präsident Clinton muss erleichtert sein über den Fehlschlag. Er hätte sich sonst entscheiden müssen zwischen seinem Vize Al Gore, der als Schützer des Vaterlandes dastehen und das Programm weitertreiben will, und den europäischen Verbündeten, die einen neuen Rüstungswettlauf mit Russland fürchten. Damit kann sich jetzt Clintons Nachfolger herumschlagen. Technische Pannen können politische Vorteile haben.
Mit Genugtuung wurde der gescheiterte Test in Russland und China aufgenommen. Dort lehnt man die Pläne der USA ab, weil sie eine Änderung des ABM-Abrüstungsvertrages erfordern würden. Aus dem russischen Verteidigungsministerium hieß es, der Fehlschlag sei ein weiterer Beweis dafür, dass ein solches System technisch nicht machbar sei.
Wäre da noch die große technische Panne, die der Politik in aller Welt mehr Zeit zum Nachdenken verschafft. Monatelang haben Russen, Europäer und Amerikaner darüber gestritten, ob es denn sinnvoll sei, durch eine neue, kühne Technologie alle bisherigen Abrüstungsverträge in Frage zu stellen. Der politische Streit, soll man das und darf man das, wurde über Nacht durch die technische Frage abgekühlt, kann man es denn überhaupt? Funktioniert es, eine Rakete auf eine Distanz von Tausenden von Kilometern auszumachen und im Flug mit einer anderen Rakete zu rammen? Es war ein trauriger Tag für die Generale und für eine Industrie, die nach 10 mageren Jahren mal wieder etwas ganz Besonderes auf den Markt bringen möchte. Aus den USA unser Korrespondent Eberhard Pilz.
Es gibt so Anrufe, da wäre man ganz gerne nicht zu erreichen. Im Pentagon ging es heute Nacht General Kertlich so, als er zur Kenntnis nehmen musste, dass alles schiefgegangen war. Radar sagt, dass sich das Kill-Vehikel nicht von der Rakete getrennt hat. Im Klartext Katastrophe. In Kalifornien war die Sprengkopfattrappe auf den Weg gebracht worden. Doch zum kompliziertesten Test, dem Kernstück der Raketenabwehr, ob das Abfanggeschoss den Angreifer auch wirklich wie geplant treffen würde, kam es gar nicht. Das Vehikel startete zwar pünktlich von einem Atoll im Pazifik, aber dann versagte etwas eigentlich routinemäßig Simples, zigtausendfach Erprobtes, der Ausstoß der Nutzlast von der Trägerrakete. Das Such- und Vernichtungsmanöver fand nicht statt. $100 Millionen verpufft. Der Präsident wollte im Herbst entscheiden, ob er grünes Licht für das politisch und strategisch höchst umstrittene System geben solle oder nicht. 4 Kriterien nannte er noch kürzlich bei der letzten Pressekonferenz zum Thema. Erstens, wie sieht die Bedrohung aus? Zweitens, beherrschen wir die Technik? Drittens, das Verhältnis der Kosten zum Nutzen und viertens die Auswirkungen auf die globale strategische Situation, also unser Verhältnis zu den Verbündeten, zu Russland und China. Das mit der Technik bleibt nun erst einmal weiterhin unklar. Doch mögen auch heute die Skeptiker Schadenfreude empfinden. Im Militär, in der Politik und in der mächtigen Rüstungslobby wird das Projekt nicht aufgegeben. Sie wollen unbedingt im Herbst einen 4. Test starten. Ob allerdings auf der gottverlassenen Insel Shermia vor Alaska schon im kommenden Jahr mit Arbeiten für die neue Raketenabwehr begonnen wird, das ist fraglich. Die Mittel dazu müsste Präsident Clinton freigeben. Und der weiß seit heute Nacht nur eines ziemlich sicher: Die endgültige Entscheidung wird sein Nachfolger treffen müssen.
Schon jetzt steht fest, der 8. Juli wird in die Buchgeschichte eingehen. Katja Stammen berichtet.
3, 2, 1, Harry Potter!
Endlich Mitternacht, Geisterstunde. In Amerika ist es die kleine Alexandra, die als erste das neue Buch bekommt. Stundenlang hatten sie und tausende Harry-Potter-Fans auf diesen Augenblick gewartet. Gedränge und lange Schlangen vor den Buchhandlungen. Um die Zeit zu überbrücken, hatten in Londons Buchläden sogar einige Kinder ihre Schlafsäcke mitgebracht. Und das alles für diesen eher unauffälligen Jungen mit der altmodischen Nickelbrille, dessen Abenteuer auf der Hexenschule Jung und Alt gleichermaßen verzaubern. Mein erstes Harry-Potter-Buch hat mir mein Vater heimlich vom Nachttisch geklaut. Gott sei Dank hat er jetzt seine eigene Ausgabe. Sie ist die Erfinderin des verwaisten Zauberknabens, Joanne Rowling. Nie hatte sie geglaubt, dass ihre Notizen von einst sie von der Sozialhilfeempfängerin zur drittreichsten Frau Großbritanniens machen würden. Weltweit verkauften sich die ersten 3 Ausgaben rund 35 Millionen Mal und wurden in 32 Sprachen übersetzt. Ich hätte nie gedacht, dass das jemandem außer meiner Familie gefallen würde. Das ist ja schon fast verrückt. Heute startete sie ihre Werbetour vom Bahnhof King's Cross mit dem Zug, der sonst immer ihre Romanhelden ins Zauberinternat zurückbringt. Schon jetzt ist Harry Potter und der Feuerkelch ein Megaseller. Die Startauflage 3,8 Millionen in den USA und 1 Million in England. Die deutschen Fans müssen sich noch ein wenig gedulden. Erst am 14. Oktober gibt's den neuen Harry Potter in deutscher Sprache auch bei uns.
Es ist Mitternacht und dies ist eine Buchhandlung. Ja, eine Buchhandlung. Die ganze Nacht geöffnet. Geöffnet für ein einziges Buch. Und da ist es, der neue Harry Potter. Der Zauberer, der weltweit Kinder wie Erwachsene in Hysterie versetzt. Der Kameraleute und Kids um die Nacht bringt und die Kassen klingeln lässt. Harry Potter, das ist ein Phänomen. Noch nie dagewesen. Unglaublich, aberwitzig. Ein Buch bringt alle um den Verstand. Und das weltweit. Und das ist sie. Sie hat Harry Potter erfunden, Joanne Rowling. Eine charmante, zurückhaltende Frau, die schüchtern durch den Erfolg wandelt und sich Mühe gibt, nett zu allen zu sein. Wie fühlt man sich so als Superstar, will das holländische Fernsehen wissen.
Ich bin kein Superstar, aber es fühlt sich merkwürdig an, hier zu sein mit so vielen Kindern. Es ist wunderbar.
Bei Amazon, dem weltweit größten Buchverkäufer im Internet, war das Buch bereits 270.000 Mal bestellt, bevor auch nur jemand den Titel kannte. Harry Potter beherrscht seit Monaten die Bestsellerlisten. Und zwar überall auf der Welt mit Platz 1, 2 und 3. Ob in New York, Tokio oder London. Nicht nur Kinder sind Harry Potter verfallen. Und Joanne Rowling kann's nicht fassen.
Die Dinge sind regelrecht explodiert. Manchmal ist das schon beängstigend.
Rowlings Erfolg liest sich wie ein Märchen. Begonnen hat alles in einem Café in Edinburgh. Hier schrieb die arbeitslose, alleinerziehende Mutter die ersten Entwürfe auf Papier servierten. Nicht für die Welt, sondern für sich.
Ich schreibe nicht, was Kinder komisch finden könnten. Ich schreibe, was ich komisch finde. Ich fürchte, das ist die Wahrheit. Es ist aber großartig, auch erwachsene Leser zu haben, die sich nicht schämen und es einfach mögen.
Für die erwachsenen Fans hat sich der Verlag einen neutralen Einband ausgedacht, denn wer will schon beim Kinderbuchlesen erwischt werden? Der jetzt erschienene Band heißt Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Auf die deutsche Übersetzung müssen wir noch bis Oktober warten. Harry Potter, das ist ein Albtraum für Verleger. Und zwar für die, die das Manuskript schnöde abgelehnt hatten. Es waren 5. Sie sahen kein Potenzial in diesem Kinderbuch. Mittlerweile sind 35 Millionen Stück verkauft und Band 4 kommt mit einer Startauflage von 1,5 Millionen in England heraus, in den USA gar mit 3,8 Millionen. Das gab es noch nie in der Welt der Bücher. Bahnsteig 9¾ Von hier startet Harry Potters Zug in die Zauberschule, in eine Welt der Wunder. Und es sei allein der Autorin überlassen, schon etwas aus dem neuen Buch zu verraten. Nur zur Erläuterung, Quidditch, das ist so eine Art Fußballspiel für Magier.
In Band 4 wird Harry zum Quidditch gehen, zum World Cup Irland gegen Bulgarien.
Wenn Joan Rowling von ihrem Harry erzählt, dann hat das nichts mit Kalkül zu tun. Fast könnte man meinen, sie spräche von ihrem Sohn. Das ist erfrischend und ehrlich.
Die Geschichten werden jetzt dunkler. Dafür gibt es 2 Gründe. Harry wird älter und er muss erfahren, dass die Lösungen nicht mehr so einfach sind. Außerdem wird es für Harry nun wirklich gefährlich.
Mehr aber wird nicht verraten. Und wenn es so weit ist, dass Kinder nachts um 12 öffentlich in Buchhandlungen lesen, statt mit der Taschenlampe unter der Bettdecke, dann kommt uns das Gerede vom Verschwinden des Buchs ziemlich lächerlich vor. Und so steigt Joan Rowling in London in den Promotionzug ein, um Harry Potter ein wenig lebendig werden zu lassen. Flankiert von Kameras und Blitzlichtgewitter. Die ruhigen Tage mit Papierservietten im Café, die sind endgültig vorbei.
поедет, что ли? Или сейчас тут?
Там на кабель, Олег, не облокачивайся.
Доброе утро, добрый вечер, дамы и господа. Это Центр управления полетами Korolyov. Good morning to everyone around the world. This is Mission Control Korolyov. You're looking at a live picture of a Russian Proton rocket poised to deliver to space the next major piece of the International Space Station, the Zvezda service module. Zvezda, the Russian word meaning star, is 26 minutes away from being launched on a path that will take it to its permanent home 14 days from now. The actual launch time is 8:56 and 36 seconds this morning Moscow time. That's 10:56 local time at Baikonur Cosmodrome in southern Kazakhstan. The 42,000-pound Zvezda was mated to its Proton rocket 5 days ago, and this past Saturday morning was transported by rail car to Launch Complex 81. Baikonur is home to many historic launch pads which dot the landscape of the sprawling complex, which measures 95 by 75 kilometers. But Zvezda's journey to the International Space Station began long ago on the drawing boards of Russia's aerospace engineers, who designed it to be the first piece of that country's newest space station, a follow-on to Mir. When Russia joined the International Space Station project in 1993, Zvezda became the centerpiece of the Russian segment of the complex and its early living quarters. After reaching the pad, the Proton rocket was raised vertically for the final preparations for launch. The 3 stages of the Proton use a combination of asymmetrical dimethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide as their propellant. The first stage has 6 liquid rocket engines that will burn for 2 minutes 6 seconds. The second stage combines the thrust of 4 liquid rocket engines that will fire for about 3 minutes 28 seconds. And the third stage has 1 liquid cruise engine that will burn for 4 minutes 3 seconds. Once the final stage has completed its job, Zvezda will be in an initial orbit of 214 miles at its high point and 108 miles at its low point. That's 343 by 173 kilometers. Additional engine firings will occur during the next 2 weeks to place Zvezda at an altitude closely matching that of the International Space Station. At the time of Zvezda's launch, the International Space Station will be flying high above the Solomon Islands over the Pacific. Once in space, Zvezda's thruster jets will perform numerous maneuvers to adjust its orbit in relation to that of the International Space Station. Leading up to docking, the 2 spacecraft will perform a dual rendezvous, meaning that engine firings are conducted by both spacecraft to refine their positions in relation to one another. About a month from now, an unpiloted Progress cargo ship will be launched atop a Soyuz rocket, delivering more supplies that will be used by astronauts and cosmonauts as the complex grows in size and capability. The Proton rocket, with Zvezda cocooned inside a protective shroud at the top, stands about 180 feet tall. That's about 55 meters. This type of launch vehicle has been used for heavy lift launches of Russian satellites since 1965. Today, the rocket, built by the Khrushchev State Research and Production Space Center, continues the complex task of putting the International Space Station together. On the scene at Baikonur awaiting Zvezda's launch is NASA's Rob Navius, who filed this report earlier.
Here at this legendary site in the Central Asian desert, all is in readiness for the launch of Zvezda just a few minutes from now. Several miles away from our viewing site is the launch pad from which Yuri Gagarin was launched almost 40 years ago to become the first human to fly in space. Today, with temperatures approaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the Russian space program begins a new chapter with the launching of the service module. We are located at Launch Complex 81 here at Baikonur, about 3 kilometers or a little less than 2 statute miles from Launch Pad 23, where the Proton sits fully fueled awaiting its liftoff. Here at the viewing site, a large group of officials and dignitaries are on hand, including NASA Administrator Daniel Golden, NASA's Associate Administrator for Spaceflight Joe Rothenberg, Johnson Space Center Director George Abbey, and Kennedy Space Center Director Roy Bridges. Russian Aviation and Space Agency General Director Yuri Koptev leads the Russian delegation here at Baikonur, along with the chief designer of the service module, Yuri Semyenov of RSC Energia. Other heads of agency involved in the International Space Station program are here as well, along with ISS Program Manager Tommy Holloway and astronaut Bob Cabana, the Deputy Manager for International Relations, who commanded the first ISS assembly mission in December 1998. And here to watch as Zvezda begins its journey are Tom Stafford and Vance Brand, the commander and command module pilot of the Apollo capsule for the Apollo-Soyuz test project, which began international partnership in space on July 15, 1975, almost 25 years ago to the day. That's it from Baikonur as we await launch, Kyle. Back to you in Korolyov.
Now just 21 minutes and 20 seconds away as the countdown clock continues to this morning's launch of the Zvezda service module. Some of the milestones in the final hours of today's countdown have included the activation of Zvezda's internal systems for final health checks, including the module's radio communications system, the thermal control system, and the motion control system to provide stability for Zvezda in orbit. About 6 hours ago, the 3 stages of the Proton rocket were loaded with propellant, which has been replenished and topped off over the past 2 hours. About 40 minutes ago, updates to the Proton's onboard computers were sent in pre-programmed commands, and just 20 minutes ago, launch officials initiated a timing device governing the final major events that lead up to the Proton's launch, again at 8:56 this morning Moscow time, 10:56 a.m. Baikonur time. Zvezda's initial development and construction was performed by Khrunichev, with most of its assembly and checkout conducted by Rocket Space Corporation Energia, located here in Korolyov near the Russian Mission Control Center. Zvezda serves as the first fully Russian contribution to the International Space Station program and will provide the living quarters necessary to put humans on board permanently later this year.
The origin of Zvezda, the third component of the International Space Station, dates to the early 1990s, when NASA, the European Space Agency, and the space agencies of Canada and Japan were planning a new space station. Russia was also laying the groundwork for a space station to succeed its Mir space station. As those designs proceeded, NASA brought the newly formed Russian Federation into the global partnership, with Zvezda to be the first fully Russian contribution to the International Space Station. Zvezda's layout is similar to the core module of Mir. The Khrunichev State Research and Production Space Center in Moscow began construction on the service module in 1991 for the Rocket Space Corporation Energia, which will operate it on orbit. In June of 1998, Khrunichev announced completion of the module and transported it across town to Energia, where it began sensitive system testing. In April 1999, in front of a large group of dignitaries, the service module was unveiled for the entire world to see. Shortly thereafter, it was placed on a special rail car for the 1,200-mile journey to the Asian launch site at the Baikonur Cosmodrome for final testing and launch preparations. Designed for an on-orbit life of up to 15 years, Zvezda is 43 feet long, more than 97 feet across from the tip of one solar array to the other, 21 tons of hardware that will ride to Earth orbit atop a Russian Proton rocket. Zvezda contains one docking port in the aft transfer chamber, where Soyuz and Progress ships can dock, and 3 docking ports around the forward transfer chamber, one to link with the aft end of the Zarya control module, and 2 more for other Russian-built components of the station due to arrive later in the station's assembly sequence. The transfer compartment will also serve as an airlock for spacewalks using the Russian Orlan spacesuit. Between these chambers is the heart of Zvezda, the main work compartment. Here, long-duration crew members will have personal sleeping quarters, complete with toilet and hygiene facilities, a galley with a refrigerator freezer, and a communal table for meals, exercise equipment, and a choice of 14 windows through which they can watch the Earth and the stars pass by. In this compartment, crew members will find the workstations to control ISS's life support system, its electrical power distribution and data processing systems, the flight control and propulsion systems, and communications with mission control centers in Houston and Korolyov. Many of the control, guidance, and navigation functions are handled by the European Space Agency-supplied data management system. This month, perched atop a Russian Proton rocket, Zvezda was rolled to the launch pad at Baikonur for the final countdown.
Back at the launch site at Launch Complex 81 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, the Proton stands ready for launch as officials conduct additional checks of its onboard batteries, having just completed a realignment of the rocket's trajectory control system. In a few minutes, Zvezda's telemetry systems will be activated and monitoring of the Proton's thermal systems begins. 10 minutes prior to launch, about 6.5 minutes from now, the Proton steering jets will be activated as well. Here in the Russian Mission Control Center, flight controllers are ready to begin their job of monitoring Zvezda following its launch and insertion into orbit. Energia will oversee the module's operation along with U.S. flight controllers making up the Houston Support Group here in Moscow and flight controllers in NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas. For Russian and American flight controllers, the next 2 weeks will be busy watching over the activation and checkout of Zvezda's systems, leading to the docking with the International Space Station's orbiting Zarya and Unity modules.
All systems aboard Zvezda, the first living quarters of the International Space Station, will be idle as the module rides to orbit atop a Russian Proton rocket. 10 minutes after launch, the module will separate from the third stage of the Proton, and rockets on that spent stage will pull it away from Zvezda. Meanwhile, an automatic sequence of computer commands on Zvezda will order deployment of antennas for its Kurs rendezvous and docking system and for the Lyra communications system. At about the same time, Zvezda's solar arrays are to deploy and immediately begin following the sun. Meanwhile, automatic commands will order the activation of the module's major systems. One orbit later, as the module flies high over Russian communication stations on the ground, mission controllers will verify the proper activation of the major systems. Then they will command the drifting Zvezda into an orientation designed to minimize propellant usage while allowing the solar arrays to gather sunlight. On the next ground station pass, controllers will reconfigure the module's onboard attitude sensors, activate its star tracker, and test the ability of a new communication system to relay information to Russian ground controllers. Tomorrow, when Zvezda again comes into the range of Russian ground stations, flight controllers will first command it to a different attitude and later will test fire its maneuvering engines. That will set the stage for the following day's 2 firings of the module's main engines, raising Zvezda's orbit to approximately the altitude of the International Space Station. Over the course of the next several days, controllers will first test the ability of the module's motion control system to orient the solar arrays while flying in darkness, and then test the efficiency of the solar arrays themselves. They will also verify telemetry to and from the motion control system computer to ensure that Zvezda is ready to meet the ISS. A day prior to docking, Zvezda will be maneuvered to its docking orientation and its solar arrays moved into the proper docking position to verify any impact that orientation will have on battery charging. The next day, the Kurs rendezvous system will be activated, and Zvezda will become the passive partner to the International Space Station as it moves toward a docking with its newest member. With the Zarya module controlling, the station will chase and catch up to Zvezda. Ground commands through Zarya's automated rendezvous system will slowly pull the station next to the module and then capture Zvezda. It will take approximately 25 minutes for the hooks and latches on the 2 modules to fully close, achieving a hard mate and adding a 3rd module to the International Space Station. Over the following 16 to 24 hours, flight controllers will closely monitor pressure between the newly joined modules to ensure an airtight seal. And then they'll begin work to turn control of most station functions over from Zarya, its first component, to Zvezda, the future home of the permanent crews on the International Space Station.
The countdown is proceeding on schedule for the launch of the Zvezda service module just 12 minutes, 15 seconds from now. Ground controllers at Baikonur are sending commands to activate the module's telemetry system, which will relay vibration and acoustic data to the American and Russian flight control teams here in Korolyov during the Proton's ascent. Standing by at NASA's Johnson Space Center in the International Space Station Flight Control Room is a team of U.S. flight controllers watching over today's activities. James Hartsfield is there with an update from the Mission Control Center half a world away in Houston. Good morning, James, or should I say good evening?
It's a very good evening here in Houston at the Mission Control Center. Here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Mission Control Center, a team of about 20 flight controllers has been monitoring the orbiting International Space Station Zarya and Unity modules. They've been on station since about 8 p.m. Central Time this evening. The team's been watching the progress of Zvezda launch activities as well. Overseeing activities tonight in the Station Flight Control Room is Station Flight Director Mark Faring. The International Space Station is currently passing over the Pacific Ocean on a southerly course through the central Pacific at an altitude of about 235 statute miles. At the time Zvezda lifts off from Baikonur, the International Space Station will be flying about 230 miles above the Solomon Islands in the Pacific Ocean. In addition to creating a home in orbit, Zvezda's launch signals the start of a cascade of station assembly flights. The teams in this room and in the Space Shuttle Flight Control Room just down the hall will oversee a rapid expansion of the International Space Station in the coming months. In fact, during the next 12 months, astronauts will conduct the most complex and difficult series of space missions attempted since men landed on the moon. Those efforts will culminate in the International Space Station becoming the largest, most powerful, and most sophisticated spacecraft ever built as quickly as the end of next year. By the fall of 2001, the station will have more electrical power, crucial for effective modern research work, than any previous space station. By that time, it already will have a volume of living and working space larger than a 3-bedroom house. And as 2001 draws to a close, it will be fully open for business, ready for the first missions dedicated primarily to research. Also by then, the end of 2001, even though it will still be less than a third of its final size, the International Space Station will already at times be the third brightest object in the night sky. In just a few months, this team of flight controllers and their partners in Moscow will be working with the first residents of the station, a crew that will bring the orbiting complex to permanent life. The exciting and challenging road from here to there begins tonight.
The launch of the Zvezda service module marks a milestone in the construction of the International Space Station, which requires over 40 flights and the addition of over 100 components to complete. In this sequence of events, the addition of Zvezda is the first time the station is transformed from a place to visit to a place to live. Assembly began in 1998 with the joining of 2 modules in Earth orbit, the Russian-built and American-funded Zarya module and the U.S.-made Unity module. Zarya primarily provided storage for supplies and fuel and station maneuverability during the early construction phase. Space Shuttle crews have already used Zarya to store food, water, and other supplies that will be used by future station crews. Unity is a connecting module with 6 portholes that lead to existing and future station elements. It also houses the early communication system, which allows ground controllers to monitor the station's health and status and issue important commands. With the 2 components joined and activated, assembly continued with the addition of more hardware on the station exterior, including a Russian space crane and an American-made crane. The stage is now set for Zvezda, equipped with sleeping quarters, water, air, power, communications, and a galley. Zvezda will allow crews to inhabit the station in 4-month rotations, ensuring humans a permanent presence in space. A key event in assembly, the existing space station will be maneuvered by ground controllers to dock with Zvezda in Earth orbit. Soon after Zvezda is in place, an unpiloted Russian cargo vessel will bring supplies for the first station crew. A shuttle logistics flight will follow to unload the Russian vessel, continue to outfit the station, and transfer additional supplies from the shuttle's Space Hab module to the station. The next mission will deliver new hardware, including an exterior framework called the Z1 Truss and a new mating adapter. With all the preparations made, the station comes to life with the arrival of the first station crew, Expedition 1. The crew will arrive via a Russian Soyuz spacecraft and is composed of Commander Bill Shepard, Soyuz Commander Yuri Gidzenko, and flight engineer Sergei Krikalev. The crew will activate station systems and will see the station grow in size and power. Within weeks, the Space Shuttle will deliver the largest solar arrays ever to fly in space. At this time in assembly, the station will be the most powerful spacecraft in history. By early 2001, the station will begin its transformation into a research complex with the addition of its first space laboratory, Destiny. As assembly continues, the station will receive a robotic arm, which will assist in building and maintaining the growing spacecraft. An airlock will be added, making it easier to conduct station spacewalks. The Japanese experiment module, named Kibo, will amplify scientific research both inside and outside the station. Within a year, it will be joined by a European laboratory, Columbus, and eventually Russian research modules, which will further the pursuits of science. When assembly is complete, the International Space Station will be the largest and most sophisticated spacecraft ever built, enabling microgravity research to be conducted for years to come. Looking back at the history of station assembly, the addition of the Zvezda module will be viewed as a turning point, when astronauts first had the ability to live in a new home in space.
Welcome to those just joining NASA Television's live coverage of the launch of the Zvezda service module from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Engineers continue to monitor all systems aboard the Proton rocket and aboard Zvezda, set to begin its voyage to space now in 5 minutes, 20 seconds. The official launch time is 8:56 and 36 seconds this morning in Moscow, 10:56 a.m. local in Baikonur. Just a few minutes ago, commands were sent to switch power from ground sources to Zvezda's onboard batteries, and soon after Zvezda reaches orbit, its command and control systems will be activated and stored computer commands will deploy communications antenna. The first will be the Coors rendezvous and docking antenna, which will be used to provide automatic range rate information to the Zarya control module, which becomes the active vehicle on the day of docking. A little more than 13 minutes after launch, Zvezda's solar arrays will be deployed, stretching to a wingspan of 95.5 feet, or about 30 meters. They will collect solar power for use by those batteries to generate electricity for equipment on board. About 90 minutes into its new life in space, Zvezda will continue its programmed activation sequence as it makes its first pass over Russian ground stations. Systems activation will begin in rapid succession, including the module's power supply system, its radio communication system, and the critical motion control system. Later today, the motion control system will establish a stable orientation for the newest module of the International Space Station. The countdown clock is now approaching 4 minutes and counting to the launch of the Zvezda service module. At the launch site, just a couple of kilometers away from the launch pad, is NASA Administrator Daniel Golden, along with other spaceflight program managers, space station program managers, and Russian spaceflight officials. They will be viewing the launch and then moving from there back to a Proton Conference Center, where they will conduct a post-launch news conference about an hour and a half or so after launch. On the launch pad here at Baikonur, or there at Baikonur, the countdown again is proceeding on schedule. They are now 3 minutes, 20 seconds away from the launch of the Proton rocket. At this point in the countdown, the Proton's booster stage steering jets are in the ready-to-launch position, and ground commands have been received from the rocket indicating that all control and auxiliary systems are ready for launch. Now approaching 3 minutes and counting to the launch. At this point, all of the data and telemetry recorders have been turned on by the Russian Space Force's ground controllers. And we now have confirmation that the telemetry system recorders have been turned on. They are designed to monitor all of the vibration and acoustic data during Zvezda's climb to orbit. Now 2 minutes, 30 seconds from launch. Now 2 minutes from launch. All systems are go for the launch of the Proton rocket carrying the Zvezda service module to the International Space Station. 1 minute point in the countdown. We have a report that the ground station recorders have been activated. All still go for the launch at 56 minutes 36 seconds after the hour. Now less than 1 minute away from a most anticipated launch of the Zvezda service module. T-minus 30 seconds. All still go for launch. A beautiful day at Baikonur with just hazy conditions and clear skies. 20 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff. We have engine ignition and liftoff of the Proton rocket carrying Zvezda, the centerpiece of Russia's contribution to the International Space Station, setting the stage for permanent human presence in space. We have reports that we have a good roll and pitch program. Reports our first stage nominal so far, 25 seconds into the launch. Zvezda is heading toward a July 26 link-up with the International Space Station. Proton rocket delivering 1.9 million pounds of thrust from its 6 engines. The first stage of the Proton measures 68 feet in length, 24 feet in diameter, as it burns for the first 2 minutes and 6 seconds of the flight, now approaching 50 seconds. Now 1 minute into the flight, all continue to go very smoothly. Still reporting all nominal with the launch. 1 minute, 25 seconds into the flight. Again, the first stage will burn for 2 minutes and 6 seconds. One minute, 45 seconds. Zvezda now heading down range. First stage performance still nominal and about to burn out at 2 minutes, 6 seconds. Now approaching the 2 minute point in the launch of the Zvezda service module atop a Proton rocket. And we have confirmation the first stage separation. The 6 liquid-fueled engines have finished their roll and have dropped away at an altitude of about 27 statute miles. The Proton is traveling about 3,700 miles an hour at this point. The second stage engine ignition has been accomplished. The second stage again will burn for the next 3 minutes or so. Reports are that all of the pressure in the tanks of the second stage are nominal. There are 4 engines that make up the second stage propulsion system, and again, those are scheduled to fire for about 3 minutes and 28 seconds. Continuing to get reports from Baikonur that all is nominal with the launch of the Zvezda service module on its way to a link-up with the International Space Station on the 26th of July, just 14 days from now. Three minutes, 30 seconds into the flight, we have confirmation that the nose fairing encapsulating Zvezda has been jettisoned at an altitude of about 48.5 statute miles, and in doing so has deployed 2 command and control antennas and a telemetry antenna on Zvezda. Proton is now traveling at a speed of about 4,700 miles per hour. All still being reported as stable. The second stage is performing as advertised for the Proton. The second stage of the Proton rocket is 56 feet in length, 13.5 feet in diameter, and its 4 engines are providing about 475,000 pounds of thrust for its 3 minute 28 seconds of operation. Approaching 4 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight, another 5 minutes or so of powered flight remaining. And about 30 seconds or so remaining in the burning of the second stage of the Proton rocket. At this point, Zvezda's onboard recorders are now collecting module telemetry as it continues its climb to orbit. We'll be standing by momentarily for the burnout of the 4 liquid-fueled second stage engines. We're standing by again for second stage burnout and separation. And we do get reports now that the motion control system is stable, all very healthy and in good shape aboard the Proton rocket. Now approaching 6 minutes into the flight. And we do have confirmation of second stage separation. Those 4 liquid-fueled engines have completed their task for today. They're now dropping it away at an altitude of about 86 statute miles and about 4 minutes or so of powered flight remaining. We now have confirmation that the single engine on the third stage is burning and all is in good shape. That engine provides about 125,000 pounds of thrust, and it will burn for about 4 minutes and 3 seconds. Proton's velocity is now more than 10,000 miles per hour. We are getting reports that the chamber pressure in the tanks on board the third stage are also nominal at this point. Computer command should be being sent to the Zvezda to prepare its own propulsion system for operations once it reaches orbit, and this process should take about 30 seconds or so to complete. Once the Proton's third stage delivers the Zvezda to orbit and the module is separated from the Proton, a series of pre-programmed commands will be executed to prepare it for orbital operations. These stored commands, called time-tagged commands, allow many of Zvezda's systems to be automatically activated by onboard computers at precise times that are stored in the onboard data management system, which is supplied by the European Space Agency. Approaching 8 minutes into the flight. All continuing to go smoothly. The yaw, pitch, and roll commanding for the third stage is all nominal. Everything going very smoothly with this morning's launch of the Zvezda service module. More than 8 minutes into the flight, again about a minute and a half or so remaining in the third stage firing of the Proton rocket. And again, standing by at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, waiting to hear the confirmation of spacecraft separation is NASA Administrator Daniel Golden, along with other NASA officials and Russian space officials as well, waiting with great anticipation for the shutdown of the third stage engine and confirmation of separation of the Zvezda service module from the Proton's third stage. We're approaching 9 minutes into the flight. All reports are everything's still going very smoothly with this morning's launch. 9 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Standing by for the confirmation of third stage engine shutdown. We have confirmation that the third stage engine has now shut down and has dropped away at an altitude of about 220 statute miles, standing by for spacecraft separation, and we now do have that confirmation that the spacecraft Zvezda is now in orbit on its own. Its latches securing it to the third stage of the Proton rocket having been released through pyrotechnic command. Proton's third stage steering jets are now firing to separate the booster from Zvezda, and the module will now begin to initiate its pre-programmed commanding for appendage deployment. Zvezda is orbiting at an altitude of about 343 by 173 kilometers. That orbit will be raised systematically over the course of the next 2 weeks, placing it in close proximity to the International Space Station for the final rendezvous and docking, again scheduled for the morning of July 26th, Moscow time. That'll be the evening on the east coast of the United States of the July 25th. We're getting reports that the timeline is being followed precisely by the Zvezda service module. There are two groups of pyrotechnic devices that control the deployment of the appendages on the spacecraft. We have confirmation that the latch and spring mechanisms holding the core's antennas are in place, have been fired, and those antennas now are being deployed. Also, the latch motors that are holding the solar arrays in place are also being released. Those solar arrays will be deployed in about a minute and a half or so. And we will get confirmation of that and pass that along as soon as it occurs. The core's antennas are used for the automatic docking that occurs again on the 26th of July. Also being deployed are two docking targets that are used for the FGB or the Zarya control module's automatic docking to the Zvezda service module. Additionally, the low data rate antenna and the high data rate antennas are being deployed. One called the Regal, which is the low data rate antenna, the other called the Lyra. Those two antennas are confirmed being deployed at this time. Now 13 minutes into the flight, and again the next activity will be confirmation that the twin solar arrays have been deployed, those to provide the electrical power from the sun, storing that into the 4 onboard batteries that are currently in the Zvezda service module. 4 additional batteries will be installed by astronauts and cosmonauts during a shuttle mission scheduled for September. Again, as we stand by to get confirmation of the solar array deployment, the launch this morning was apparently flawless. The launch time right on time at 56 minutes, 36 seconds after the hour. That was just 14 minutes, 20 seconds ago. By all accounts, the climb to orbit using the Proton rocket was without incident. Zvezda, the service module, the Zvezda standing for the Russian word for star, is now on its own, and will go through a series of pre-programmed commands over the next several days. Later today, or actually tomorrow, there will be 2 test burns of Zvezda's engines that are located on the back end of the module. Those to verify their performance. They also will actually provide a little bit of altitude boost to Zvezda as it begins to refine its orbit in relation to that of the International Space Station. We have confirmation that the solar arrays are now being deployed. That sequence takes about a minute or so. And at 15 minutes, 40 seconds into the flight, we now have received confirmation of both solar arrays being deployed on the Zvezda service module. Those solar arrays stretching the wingspan of the module to 30 meters, or about 95.5 feet. Telemetry on the ground showing the modules in excellent shape, and we are trying to confirm the deployment of all of the appendages that were scheduled for deployment during this sequence. At this point, all accounts are that everything has gone very smoothly with the launch of the Zvezda service module, and 14 days from now, a link-up in space will take place high above the Asian continent. That docking will make Zvezda the newest addition to the International Space Station to provide the living quarters for people from many nations to further humankind's quest to explore.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this very important day, which is indeed a very important day for manned spaceflight, for the European Space Agency, and of course for this center, the launch of this service module, one of the main elements of the International Space Station. In just under 20 minutes, we can expect this launch with original videos from Baikonur, and we will right now have a link with a representative at the Russian Control Center, the SUB near Moscow, who is Jochen Graf. Good morning, Jochen, can you hear me?
Good morning, Thomas. Good morning, everybody from the Russian mission. Good morning, everybody from the Russian Mission Control Center, SUB in Moscow. We are here in the space station control room, which is the first time in full use for this program. What you see in front of you is the big screen. Very important on the right side in yellow, the countdown clock. It is now 19 minutes and 43 seconds before liftoff. In the center, you see the status of the countdown as it is proceeding. Important that 2 hours and 10 minutes before liftoff, the data management system has been switched off. We have confirmation that all 6 computers are fully up and running. Temperature has been stabilized and everything is okay concerning the data management system. We have the thermal control system has been switched on. The service tower has been removed, as you have seen. And important, at L-45 minutes, the automatic launch sequence has been initiated. And we are now waiting at 14 minutes before liftoff, the arming of the fairing separation system. The control room here is fully manned, as you can see. Since about 2 hours ago, people have been coming in to work here. And we have also a dedicated console, which you can see, which is reserved for the European agency and contractor staff, and they monitor the performance of the data management system and of the service module
Jochen,
during
thank you very much
flight.
for this first report. So everything is on track, and we are really expecting this important event in about 19 minutes.
Today it's really important for the International Space Station. Service module is a living quarter, so it actually becomes a real space station in 2 weeks when docked. With me here, the director of Manned Spaceflight, Jörg Förstel-Böhel. This is an important moment for European involvement in this stage and for this center too. Could you give some comments?
Of course, first of all, that is an important moment for the International Space Station community. We have been looking forward a long time to that important launch event of the service module Zvezda, which will be launched in a few minutes, hopefully. And that, as you correctly say, is already making the space station first operational tool in a few months from now on. Of course, we will have to continue our assembly sequence, but with the service module, we are really achieving a major milestone. The most important day is, of course, for the Russians. With the service module Zvezda, they are delivering their key element to the International Space Station. But I would not like to neglect that also for us here in Europe, it is an extremely important day. The service module plays an important role for our deliveries and for our future operations. We have on board, as you already heard, the data management system, which is a sort of central computer of this important module. The Zvezda will house also in a few years from now the European robotic arm, which will operate on board of Zvezda. We will actually also dock our ATV, our automatic transfer vehicle, to the service module. That is our most important contribution to the operations of the International Space Station. And finally, I would like to also mention that we are using very soon the service module as an experiment module. You will hear later on more about this, but we have already two important experiments on board of Zvezda that will fly up today. One is a commercial experiment and the other one is a scientific experiment, which will already open for us the possibility to make experiments on board of that module. Last but not least, of course, the day today is first also for our Erasmus User Center here in Holland. We are transmitting for the first time live pictures of a launch of the International Space Station. And as everybody knows, there are many more to come, and I hope this center will also qualify as such a station.
Thank you very much, Mr. Förstel-Böhel. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know that the International Space Station is a huge construction. It has approximately 1.5 times the size of a football field. Maybe this is a good moment to look back about the assembly that has been taken place till now. Okay. The launch of the FGB took place approximately 1.5 years ago, on the 20th of November 98, and only a few weeks later, the Node 1 Unity module was launched with the Shuttle, as you can see at the moment in the video clip we prepared for you. Here you see already the preparation of the service module, which is getting ready for launch in the assembly building in Kazakhstan. And this is the docking which will take place in approximately 2 weeks.
So we are really at the very early stage of the assembly, and some more 40 flights will be needed. So let's look maybe, have a look to this Zvezda model.
Let's just start on this right corner here. You see little cabinets on this side. I just step into it. Now, imagine this is a sleeping room, less than a square meter of place, but in weightlessness, it doesn't actually matter. You can place your sleeping bags on the wall or on the ceiling. If we come out here, we see a big table, and this is the place not only where the crew takes its meals, but also where a lot of work will be done, a lot of experiments, because this table can be used to strap down standalone experiments. Behind this wall, you have the water recovery system in order to prepare the food and, of course, to provide drinking water to the crew. And we just go around here.
To the atmosphere, maybe?
Oh, yes. You see here two of these silver assemblies. Those are oxygen generators, part of the life support systems, which also are placed behind your backlody in these walls.
There is two kinds of
yes, we have these emergency oxygen supply systems, which are loaded with chemical cartridges. They are placed in here, and we have an electrolysis system. So we continue in this direction. Behind the wall here, by the way, you have the drives for the solar arrays who are providing the electricity for the station. And here you see a lot of control panels. This is the central control post of the service module. This post, for example, is used for remote controlling the docking of the Progress transport vehicles, or, if needed, the approach of the FGB, which is already in orbit. And finally, on my right side, you see the central warning panel, and most important for us at the moment, there are two places for laptops, which are the interface to the central computer system of the service module, which is, of course, for us a very important piece of equipment. These computer systems, it's consisting of a lot of different computers, are actually placed on the wall, which would be on this side. And this is what we probably look a little bit more into detail right now.
Yes, I think we will have some video to try to see a little bit the integration and construction of the Zvezda module in Moscow, and also the DMSR that will be integrated.
Okay, here we have an external view of the service module. You can see as the technicians are crawling in and preparing everything for the launch. This is already in this assembly building in Baikonur. A last view on the DMSR as it is stored inside the service module. And here you have a view from the laboratory. This is one of the laptops which interfaces to the DMSR with a homepage, the so-called homepage, from which the cosmonauts can call up all the function. And this is the system itself, the DMSR, and I think it's quite remarkable that this processor technology is the most advanced at the moment on board the space station. Even on the American segment, the processors, or most of the processors used there, are a little bit older, about 10 years, and that goes back on a development about 6 years old.
Okay, I'm now with Stefan Grohr. Good morning.
Good morning, Claudia.
So you in Astrium were building the DMSR. Tell us a little bit about the role, the function. It has been referred even as the brain of the space station. Is it an exaggeration?
Yes, it is the brain of the space station, and the real test of this brain I think we will have in the night of the 24th, 26th or 27th, when the docking procedure will come, when this module will be docked with the configuration just in orbit. And then these FTCs, failure tolerant computers, and all the DMSR system will be in operation. And that's the real test of the software, which is behind these small boxes you can see here.
It's a particular approach.
That's really the brain, and that will be the test. And it's really exciting for us that we have delivered this system in 1998. Our engineers at home in Bremen and Toulouse have developed this fault-tolerant computer and data management system since 1959.
For 10 years lifetime on board
the 10 years lifetime, and that is one of the real topics. We produce and develop a key element, a software avionics system for the total station, not only for the assembly sequence, but also for the operation sequence. And the challenge is to operate the system more than 10 years. And for that, we have to standardize the system. We have to maintain the system more than 10 years. And for software, it's a real challenge. You know, the cycle is 2 years, 3 years, and then new software will coming up.
Because this also will be used for other items at the space station, for ATV and...
Here it will be used, and that's the standardization process of this software and computers. The first use is within the DMSR. The second is in the ATV, and some elements of this system are active then in the Columbus system. We try to sell that even to the Americans. They have some problems by American. Even, I think, European systems are the best when we are talking about this software system. You ask for the task of the software, so we have to control the attitude of the full station. We have to control the data and the management flow, and even this system will be active when the European robotic arm, for example, is in operation to assembly the Russian part of the space station. So it's a full scenario of the total station, which in this brain and this heart of the station.
And this brain has been built in Western Germany.
Western Germany is gone. It has been built in Germany and in Toulouse, in Astium. And the system design was in Bremen. A big contribution was in Toulouse, and both are now fitted in the new company Astium in this integrated team. And I have great confidence that we are ready to operate the system by this company, by this good staffing and good engineering from Bremen and from Toulouse.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Graul, for this explanation of the DMSR. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are again linked with Jochen Graf in Zug to hear about the latest developments in the Russian Control Center. Jochen, can you give us an update, please?
Yes. We are back here at from the control center, 6 minutes and 25 seconds and counting. We have in the meantime had the arming of the fairing separation system has taken place. The important thing, the service module has switched to internal power at 9 minutes before liftoff, and we are waiting for the important 5 minute before liftoff launcher readiness signal.
Okay, super. Jochen, I will come back to you in a moment, and we just would like to get also an update from our control room here with Roland Lütgen. Roland, can you give us also a little update?
Yes, Thomas, this is Roland. We are following the last activities of the service module launch preparation. We've received telemetry from the service module up to about 2 minutes ago. We are waiting for the service module telemetry recorders to be activated, and looks like everything is ready for launch.
Well, wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have with me Mr. Mark Heppner, who has the overall responsibility for the space station utilization and the microgravity promotion. Good day, Mr. Heppner.
Hello, Thomas.
I think this is also a very important day for you, huh?
Absolutely. Apart from that, this is a very important step in assembling the space station. It is also a very important step for the scientists who look forward to using the space station for their research. And already with this launch, you will see that soon after you will have one experiment from Europe, which is now black body, which is used for studying the health of astronauts when they are doing research on the external side of the station. Later on, you will also see that the research will focus on health which is applicable on Earth. You will see that research will be focusing on, for example, osteoporosis, which is a big health problem on Earth. You will see research focusing on cardiovascular problems of the equilibrium system. And all these type of things are really already in proposals that we have right now, and they will be executed later on when the space station is in assembly.
Mark, how was the response to the announcement of opportunities for the scientific community in Europe?
Well, this was very much above expectations. We have issued now 3 announcements of opportunities, 1 for the use of the space station at the external locations, and 2 for what you can do inside. And we have received several hundreds of proposals from all over Europe. really too much ever to accommodate. So we have applied strict criteria in principle on the scientific sense. But we have also received, and this is something which we really like, proposals from industry who want to do research in applications. They want to use the station in looking, for example, for cleaner combustion processes in cars or in power plants on Earth.
Okay. So thank you very much for the moment, Mark. I think we don't have to be worried about the scientific participation in that and the utilization.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for the moment. Now, as we are closing up to launch, ladies and gentlemen, it's something like 3 minutes left. Let's again switch over to Jochen Graf at ZUP and hear about the latest preparations at the control center. Jochen, how are things going there?
Yes, I'm here. Are we on?
Yes, we can hear you, Jochen.
The launcher has given its readiness signal. We are waiting in 45 seconds that also the service module gives its final launch readiness signal. Important is then the launcher is fully on automatic countdown. About 2.5 seconds before liftoff, the Proton rocket switches to internal power, at which point in time there will also be the ignition signal to the main engines, and 1.6 seconds before liftoff will be the full thrust command given to the engines, and then at the liftoff time, 0 time, it is actually liftoff. Everything is going, we got the 3-minute readiness signal and everything is go for launch.
And I think also the tension is increasing in the auditorium there in the control center as it is here, I suppose.
Yes, it is. The room is full. There are quite about 50 journalists here. About 30 cameras are pointing in the control room. Everybody has left the seats and is standing up to watch on the center screen the rocket standing in Baikonur. We have 1 minute and 41 seconds and counting.
So maybe we use a few seconds to take a look at what is going on in orbit right now. The Saria module and the Unity module are in an altitude of approximately 350 kilometers, and of course the launch window is done in a way that the rocket can reach this. Okay, we don't have this video ready, so we just are standing by for this launch.
It is 1 minute and 1 second and counting. The last minute has started to go. Thirty seconds and counting. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And we have liftoff. The first stage is in full power and everything is okay on the stage. It will burn for 126 seconds when we will have separation of the first stage. Tank pressure is normal. The trajectory is as planned. And we will in a few minutes see here on the center screen the projection of the trajectory and the distance from the launch pad, the velocity and altitude. We're 80 seconds after liftoff. All systems are working normally. The telemetry system is okay. Data are received from the rocket. Trajectory okay. We're at 105 seconds after liftoff. 20 seconds to separation. 10 seconds to separation. We shall have separation. Separation has been confirmed. We see now the projection. On the map, you see the ground track going from left to right. You see the trajectory. The dimensions are in kilometers. It's now at 62 kilometer height, and the range is about 104 kilometers. And far on the left side, you see the orbital velocity, which is now 1,937 meters per second.
Systems okay, and the engine also okay. Pressure
All systems on the second stage are okay. Engine pressure and everything is okay.
Main fairing separation confirmed.
The main fairing has been separated, and it is confirmed. You see it on the screen. The service module is now fully visible, or should be fully visible, on top of the rocket. (89-90 kilometer height and 270 kilometers). You see on the ground track a red shaded area, which is the impact area of the first stage. We'll later see another one, which is the impact area further to the right, which is the impact area of the fairing. Engines working nominal. Velocity approaching the 3,000 meters per second. 106 kilometers altitude and range 315 kilometers.
Pressure, engines okay. Trajectory.
Pressure, engines, everything okay.
System nominal.
All systems are nominal. The second stage will burn for another about 100 seconds before the second stage is ignited.
To separation of second stage.
30 seconds to separation of second stage. At an altitude, we're now at 127 kilometers. You see also on the countdown clock had switched to seconds, and it will continue to count just seconds after liftoff. It will not show hours and minutes. So we're at 3:43, so the second stage has been separated and has been ignited. So it is now the last stage, on top of which the service module is located. Engines also of the second stage are working normal. Third stage. We have just got a message that we are receiving.
Jochen, thank you very much for the moment. I think that was really a great launch and everything seems to be quite nominal. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, on board the service module is also the first European experiment. And I have with me Mr. Huber from the Steinpeis Transfer Center, who is responsible for this experiment. Now, Mr. Huber, I guess this is also a relief for you. And probably you can give us a little bit an idea what this experiment is about and when it will become operational.
Yes, of course. Maybe you all know these radio-controlled watches that always adjust the time according to the local time zone. But as soon as you travel to another country, the time zone is no longer correct. You have, for instance, a watch that has a dual display, and we want to overcome this limitation by creating a time signal that is transmitted from the space station to the ground, which will always adjust your watch to the local time. But moreover, our signal is coded in a special way, and we have different applications like turning off stolen cars by sending a signal to a key, or you could even turn off a stolen credit card.
How long would it take actually until such a signal would reach a certain point on Earth? Is that instantaneous or does it take a certain delay?
Of course, we have only one space station so far, so in order to turn off a transmitter, we need to get a radio contact with the ground. So it can take 2 or 3 orbits before we have a radio contact, but in case of a wristwatch or of a stolen car, you don't need immediate access.
I think there is another quite remarkable point about this experiment concerning commercialization of spaceflight, isn't it?
We want to offer this as a commercial service. The antenna is now already mounted on the service module. It's now in orbit. We have this antenna array with a serial beam. This electronic unit will be transferred with a progress module and installed by the cosmonauts within 6 months, and then we are operational, and we are planning to found a service company within 2 years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huber, and good luck for this very important first European experiment.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. As we are approaching now the orbital injection, Claudie, over to you.
Thanks, Thomas. We heard before the launch that the DMSR will also be used to control the docking of the ATV, the Automated Transfer Vehicle. With me today, Patrice Amadieu, the ATV Project Manager. Could you give us some more information?
Yes, first thank you very much, and of course it's a great event for the space station overall, but also for the ATV, which hopefully will dock to the service module in few years from now.
Yeah, maybe we can have at the same time the video.
Okay, yes, let's have a look to that. Okay.
No, please. Tell us some characteristic of the ATV, the mission.
The ATV itself is a vehicle which in fact will make automatic docking to the station, and therefore only after that will communicate with the data management system of the service module. The ATV is a 20.5 ton vehicle when it is fully loaded, about 10 meters high, 4.5 meters diameter, and with a solar arrays up to 20 meters tip to tip. So it's a quite big vehicle.
Launched by Ariane 5.
It will be launched by Ariane 5 Plus in end 2003 or first part of 2004. And it's worth to mention that recently the European Space Agency has signed a contract with Arianespace for 9 launches, which is therefore covering the 10 years of ATV operations and launches. And the ATV mission, to complete that, of course, will be not only to provide pressurized payload to the station for refurbishment, but also will make refuel to the FGB tanks, and also will contribute mainly to the reboost of the station in orbit, which is one of the main functions for the system and for the operating of the space station.
Thanks a lot. It's a nice project for Europe.
Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think in the meantime the service module has been injected into orbit, and let's just ask Jochen Graf at ZUP how things are going there. Jochen, give us a little update, please.
Okay, Thomas, we just had a big round of applause for the separation of the service module from the third stage. Now the automatic software on board executing in the DMSR computers is now performing the deployment of the mechanisms. The core system is being activated and deployed. The antennas are opening.
Okay, so everything is still
So
in nominal
now
way.
the solar arrays are starting to get deployed. We see an animation here on the main screen. The Regul antenna is also being deployed. The solar arrays are about halfway deployed. These are the largest solar arrays which have ever flown. And the last big deployment will be the antenna, the big Luch antenna on the back end of the service module, but that will only happen after the solar arrays are fully deployed. We're now at 12 minutes and 40 seconds after liftoff, and we will, in 18 minutes after liftoff, we'll have the first detailed telemetry data from the service module itself.
Thank you very much, Jochen, for the moment. We might come back to you just for the acquisition of signal. Now, as the service module is in orbit, maybe we take a little look into the future about the further assembly of the International Space Station. And again, we have prepared a little video that shows you in a short time how this assembly will continue. First, we take a little tour through the service module, which is now also floating like this in weightlessness in orbit. Here you see again the central control post. Still no people on board, but this will come in a few months. And as we are going outside this hatch into space, we see how the further assembly will take place. This big structure is more and more building up, and as it has been mentioned before, it takes approximately 40, even a little bit more flights to come to its final configuration. It's, I think, worth to mention that the European Space Agency is not only participating with this main part, at least from the financial volume, the Columbus module, but it is also involved in the production of more infrastructure, 2 nodes, the cupola, scientific hardware, and of course the European robotic arm, which will be delivered on the SPP, which the service module will host. Okay, now as we are waiting for the acquisition of signal, maybe we asked our director for some comments of these quite exciting pictures we have just seen. Mr. Feustel-Büchel, what are your feelings at this moment?
Of course, I am excited and I'm pleased with the success. Zvezda means star. I think one can say a new star is born. That is really a great achievement for our Russian friends, whom I would like to fully congratulate for their achievements. But it's also a great achievement for all of us, the space station community. And I think one very important element is now up in orbit. We are waiting for the acquisition signal.
Yes.
And in 2 weeks, as already heard, we are going to see the docking, hopefully with a great success, to the other elements of the space station. So we are ready to go. That's a real great day for all of us, and I hope we will continue in the same positive manner with the other elements to come.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Feustel-Büchel. Now, the ATV, which has been mentioned before, will of course also carry a lot of payload to the International Space Station, which then will be used by the astronauts. And maybe we spend a few words on the European astronaut course, Claudie.
Yes, for the time being, in the European Astronaut Center, we're 16 astronauts. 10 of us are in duties in Houston, training for mission Shuttle or ISS increment mission, and the other one in Europe, in STEC or in Köln, in ESC. So we can speak also a little bit about what kind of training and how long it will take to be ready.
I think the way to come to the space station for astronaut is quite a long one. The training basically is divided into 3 parts. You get a basic training where you learn all the basic things for becoming an astronaut. Then you get into an advanced training, which takes approximately 1.5 to 2 years, where you specifically get training of all the onboard systems of the Russian and the American segment, and of course the parts of the international partners, like, for example, the Columbus Laboratory. And finally, once you are assigned to a specific flight, a so-called increment, you get mission-specific training, which is depending, of course, on the contents of this mission and takes approximately 1 year, maybe slightly more. So overall, you can say it takes 3 years to get prepared for such a mission. And in the meantime, while you are waiting for these assignments, the European astronauts are working in technical jobs, either here at ESTEC or in Houston or at the European Astronaut Center. Okay, so I think this is a good moment to hear last time some information from the control center in Zug. Jochen, how are things developing there?
Do you hear me?
Yes, Jochen, we can hear you very well.
Everything is perfect here. I have with me Dr. Branitz, who is the avionics chief and our counterpart for the data management system. His people have designed all the software, which we have seen so perfectly operating. And we can ask him to say a few words to how he thinks about how it's going. Is this microphone working? Vladimir? Yes, you can say now something.
Okay. Now it is exciting moment when service module begin operate in the space in automatical mode, controlled by our main computer system. And computer system begin operate before launch and provide existing sum of system inside when launch on orbit. And now they make the first action of deployment element of construction. And everything is working on the plan and successful. We are satisfied. We now are at the end of very long way of development, manufacturing, and preparing for the activity, testing. And I believe, and we believe, on the maybe more long way of operating in space.
Yes.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Thomas, we should now have telemetry data acquisition. We're just waiting to hear from the people downstairs that we have live telemetry data coming from the service module. Christian, can you check what the situation is on the telemetry data with our console people? Because that's the most important event now, that we hear that the service module is also communicating live with the ground. We have coverage now.
Now we have 1 minute up to the end of telemetry data acquisition.
Yeah. So
and,
one more.
And all the data is in such way that everything go on the plan, as foreseen in our software.
Russian control center. I think the fact that we have now the acquisition of telemetry data is really showing that everything has been running nominal up to this point. And just before we end, let's have a last link to our control room up there. Roland, how are things in our control room here at ESTEC?
Yes, thank you, Thomas. We just start to receive the first bits of service module telemetry. Everything is working nominal according to what we see right now, but for sure we wait for the complete set of data. But from our perspective, everything works nominal, and we are very pleased with the launch of the service module.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roland. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this basically concludes our presentation today. Thank you very much for attending this very important moment for the manned spaceflight in Europe and, of course, the manned spaceflight of the whole world. We thank you for getting up that early and enjoying with us the launch of the Zvezda module.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. Congratulations. Au revoir. Bravo, Thomas.
Eine russische Trägerrakete mit dem zentralen Servicemodul für die internationale Raumstation ISS ist heute am frühen Morgen pünktlich ins All gestartet. Genau um 6:57 Uhr hob die rund 50 Meter lange Proton-Rakete vom Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ab. An Bord das Wohnmodul Zvezda. Es ist von entscheidender Bedeutung für die weitere Entwicklung der Raumstation. Es enthält Schlafkojen für die Besatzung und beherbergt das Abwasser- und Flugkontrollsystem der ISS. Ursprünglich hätte dieser Teil der Raumstation schon im April 1998 ins All gebracht werden sollen. Wegen Geldknappheit hatte die russische Regierung das Projekt aber mehrmals verschoben. Einen Teil der Kosten hat schließlich die US-Imbisskette Pizza Hut übernommen.
Now, liftoff was just over 1 hour ago. The addition of the Zvezda service module will finally allow the first manned mission to the space station in late October. CNN's Steve Harrigan followed the launch from Russia's mission control outside of Moscow, and he joins us now with details. Steve, it looks so far like it's been successful.
So far, so good, Suzanne, and the mood here at Russian Mission Control is really one of elation. There's also a sense of relief on the part of the Russian engineers here. This launch has been delayed for more than 2 years. 2 years of waiting, either because of technical problems or financial problems in the Russian economy. Those delays have caused a lot of frustration among the partners on this International Space Station. 16 different countries are involved. It's more than a $60 billion project. There were also some last-minute concerns about the rocket involved to launch the module into space. The Proton rocket failed twice last year, but after some redesigns, it apparently went off without a hitch today. That Zvezda module, now 240 miles above the surface of the Earth. It will link up automatically later this month with other components of the space station. Now, the Zvezda is really the key to the space station. It is both the nerve center. It will also be the living quarters for the first inhabitants of the space station. They are slated to take off at the end of October. That will be a 3-man crew, 2 Russian cosmonauts, 1 American astronaut. It could be the first of what could be a 15-year continuous manned presence in space. Suzanne?
Steve, 2 years of waiting. As you said, there were some concerns over the rocket earlier. However, it seems as though everything is fine. What happens next? This piece is now in orbit, this crucial first piece. Do they just start building onto this now, or what?
Well, basically, this piece will dock with what's already up there, 240 miles above the Earth's surface. It'll dock automatically, and that really will pave the way for a series of manned missions. Now, it's not going to be that easy once it does dock for that first crew on board. Although this is a giant piece of equipment, the Zvezda, it weighs more than 40,000 pounds. It's going to be very cramped quarters for that first crew, which will be a crew of 3. There are just 2 sleeping quarters. so they'll have to share. It's also probably be a very noisy atmosphere. Russia, space officials, and NASA U.S. officials have very different standards as far as noise reduction goes. Right now, the level of sound has been compared to that of a busy highway. So we could be looking at some cramped quarters, a noisy environment, and some cross-cultural relations. Really a tough trip ahead, but really a hurdle overcome today by the Russians, but some more difficult times ahead, especially for that first crew on board the International Space Station. Suzanne?
All right, CNN's Steve Harrigan reporting from Russia's Mission Control outside of Moscow. It looks like a successful first start to that long trip. Thank you, Steve.
Russischen Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ist eine Trägerrakete zur Baustelle der Internationalen Weltraumstation ISS gestartet. An Bord ein Servicemodul, das Schlafkojen für die Besatzung und eine Flugkontrollstation enthält. Der Transport war ursprünglich schon früher geplant. Aufgrund technischer und finanzieller Probleme der Russen musste er jedoch mehrmals verschoben werden.
Das neue Modul beherbergt Schlaf- und Arbeitsquartiere für die Astronauten. Der Start war bereits für April 1999 geplant, musste aber wegen finanzieller und technischer Probleme mehrmals verschoben werden.
Es war ein Bilderbuchstart. Punkt 6:56 Uhr hob die Trägerrakete mit dem Modul an Bord vom Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ab. Bereits 9 Minuten später erreichte das Modul seine Umlaufbahn und wurde von der Trägerrakete abgekoppelt. Alles läuft nach Plan. Alle Systeme funktionieren, teilte die Flugleitzentrale in Moskau mit. Am 26. Juli soll die Wohn- und Kommandokapsel an die internationale Raumstation andocken. Neben den Kontrollsystemen für die Raumstation beherbergt sie Schlafräume, Badezimmer und Fitnessraum für die Astronauten. Am Bau der internationalen Raumstation sind 16 Länder beteiligt. Nach ihrer Fertigstellung soll sie einem Stadtviertel gleichen und nach Mond und Venus der dritthellste Stern am Himmel sein.
It was 2 years late in getting launched, but it means the 16-nation project is moving forward again. Details now from CNN's Miles O'Brien.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
Better late than never. From the launch facility that sent the first man into orbit almost 40 years ago, a Russian rocket streaked to the heavens, carrying the hopes of 16 nations trying to forge a new era for humans in space. For leaders of the U.S. and Russian space programs, it was a moment to savor after 2 years of frustrating financial and technical delays.
Сила наша в единстве. Сила наша. Our strength is in unity. It was essential that we keep sights on the target, and the target was and is to create this wonderful, this beautiful international space station.
It's called Zvezda, the Russian word for star. It will be the nerve center for the International Space Station during the first permanent manned missions, keeping the station in its desired orbit and providing living quarters for the Vanguard crews. Once attached to the two-module station, Zvezda should break a logjam, setting the stage for a dizzying 15 launches to build and outfit the station in the next calendar year.
We are going to have more problems. We're going to have more difficulties. The space station is going to be built, and then we're going to figure out how people live and work in space, and we will get to Mars.
Zvezda should dock with the space station in 2 weeks. After 3 construction missions by shuttle crews, the first permanent station crew is slated to arrive in November. ISS partners hope that will mark the start of a 15-year continuous multinational manned presence in space. Miles O'Brien, CNN.
Die Mission ISS nimmt langsam Gestalt an. Am Morgen brachte eine russische Trägerrakete das Servicemodul Zvezda ins Weltall. 9 Minuten nach dem Start aus dem Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur wurde das Modul abgekoppelt. Am 26. Juli soll die Zvezda automatisch an die Raumstation andocken. Das $300 Millionen teure Modul beherbergt mit seinen Schlaf- und Arbeitsquartieren künftig die Raumfahrerteams.
Raumfahrt, denn Zvezda, zu Deutsch Stern, heißt das russische Modul, das heute Morgen mit Kurs auf die internationale Raumstation ISS ins All geschossen wurde. Wenn alles gut läuft, soll Zvezda in 2 Wochen an die schon im All befindlichen Bauteile andocken.
Ein Bilderbuchstart heute Morgen in Baikonur. Die Trägerrakete Proton K hebt sicher vom Boden ab. Nach 2 Fehlversuchen im letzten Jahr läuft diesmal alles bestens. Zvezda, das russische Servicemodul, gelangt sicher ins All. Jubel im Flugleitzentrum. Das größte Technologieprojekt dieses Jahrhunderts, die internationale Raumstation, wird Wirklichkeit. Federführend deutsche Ingenieure.
Es ist ein Meilenstein im Aufbau der internationalen Raumstation, eben auch in der internationalen Kooperation.
einer der wichtigsten Meilensteine. Und für uns ganz besonders freuen wir uns, dass unser Rechnersystem so prima funktioniert hat. Denn es soll ja in ein paar Jahren auf dem Automated Transfer Vehicle, einem europäischen Beitrag zur Station, wieder fliegen.
Wenn alles gut geht, soll Zvezda am 26. Juli an die beiden bereits im Weltraum befindlichen Bausteine angekoppelt werden. Für ein reibungsloses Manöver soll der deutsche Bordcomputer sorgen. In diesen 4 Kästen sitzt das Superhirn, der intelligenteste Rechner der Welt, steuert die Station. Noch wichtiger als dieser gelungene Start ist seine politische Botschaft. Der sinnlose Wettlauf im Kosmos ist vorbei. 15 Staaten, darunter die früheren Gegner, USA und Russland, werden den Weltraum jetzt gemeinsam erforschen, zum Nutzen der gesamten Menschheit. Und Deutschland ist dabei. Eine amerikanische Pizzakette hatte den Start gesponsert mit $1 Million. Davon konnten die Russen den Treibstoff bezahlen für die Rakete, die das Servicemodul Zvezda heute Morgen sicher ins All beförderte. Zvezda ist der 3. Baustein der internationalen Raumstation, die bis zum Jahre 2005 entstehen soll. Im Inneren des 20 Tonnen schweren Flugkörpers 3 Schlafzimmer, ein Labor und der Kommandostand. Das Wichtigste ganz unten am Boden kommt aus Deutschland. In diesen 4 Boxen der Bordcomputer, das Superhirn der Station, 100 Millionen Mark wert. Er steuert auch das Manöver, mit dem Zvezda am 26. Juli an die beiden bereits im Kosmos befindlichen Bausteine der Station andocken soll. Das war ein guter Deal mit den Deutschen, sagt Chefkonstrukteur Valeri Rjumin. Wir liefern die Kupplungsmechanik, die Deutschen im Austausch den Computer. Ein tolles Ding. Auf der Erde hat er hervorragend funktioniert. Nun hoffen wir, dass er sich auch im Weltraum bewährt. Im Moskauer Flugleitzentrum. Beifall nach dem Bilderbuchstart am Morgen. An den Steuerpulten Ingenieure aus 15 Staaten, auch aus Deutschland. Sie bauen mit am größten Technologieprojekt dieses Jahrhunderts, an ISS, der Internationalen Raumstation. Sind alle Bausteine montiert, soll ISS einmal so aussehen. Labors der Amerikaner und Russen aus Europa und Japan gemeinsam im All. Ende Oktober schon sollen die ersten Menschen in die halbfertige Station einziehen. 2 Russen und ein Amerikaner. Zurzeit noch beim Unterwassertraining in Moskau, dem wohl härtesten Abschnitt bei der Vorbereitung auf den Flug.
Und jetzt live zugeschaltet aus Nordweg ein Mann, der schon einmal völlig losgelöst von der Erde im Weltall war. Ich sag mal, unser Major Tom, Thomas Reiter, herzlich willkommen, hallo. Sie stehen Sie stehen da in Nordweg vor einem Modell dieses super Wohn- und Servicemoduls. Jetzt machen Sie doch mal für uns so eine kleine Wohnungsführung, bitte.
Ganz genau. Also das natürlich nur als Wohnmodul zu bezeichnen, ist etwas untertrieben, wenngleich wir hier direkt sozusagen in dem Aufenthaltsbereich dieses Servicemoduls stehen. Sie sehen hier hinten an der Wand so eine kleine Nische. Das ist eine der beiden Kajüten, die da untergebracht sind. Grundfläche weniger als 1 Quadratmeter. Mehr braucht man in der Schwerelosigkeit auch nicht, denn den Schlafsack kann man an die Wand oder an die Decke hängen. Und das ist dafür ausreichend. Dann sehen wir hier so einen Tisch, an dem die Besatzung natürlich zum einen ihre Speisen einnimmt, aber der natürlich, da es der einzige Tisch im russischen Segment ist, auch zur Reparaturarbeit, zur Durchführung von Experimenten verwendet wird. Wenn wir dann ein Stückchen weiter hier in diesem Modul uns nach vorne bewegen, wir sehen hier an der Wand so verschiedene Gerätschaften angebaut. Das sind im Wesentlichen Lebenserhaltungssysteme, die das Kohlendioxid, was beim Atmen erzeugt wird, rausfiltern, die Sauerstoff erzeugen. Und dann kommen wir schließlich zu dem ganz entscheidenden Teil dieses Moduls, nämlich der zentralen Kommandostelle. Wir sehen hier verschiedene Kontrollpulte, die zur Fernsteuerung von Progress-Transportern, unbemannten Transportraumschiffen, die die Station mit Nahrung und Ersatzteilen und so weiter versorgen. Und wir sehen hier vorne einen Laptop, der die Schnittstelle zu dem zentralen Computersystem dieses Servicemoduls darstellt. Und dieses zentrale Computersystem, das DMSR, Data Management System, wurde im Auftrag der Europäischen Raumfahrtagentur ESA unter deutscher Federführung entwickelt. Dieses Modul ist heute Morgen erfolgreich gestartet, befindet sich inzwischen im Erdorbit in ungefähr 180 Kilometern Höhe und bis jetzt ist alles, Gott sei Dank, nominal verlaufen.
Mensch, das sieht ja alles total modern und durchgestylt aus. Sie sind ja mit allen Weltraumwassern gewaschen, waren auch auf der Mir. Ich sag mal, das ist ja ein Unterschied jetzt wie zwischen Dacia und Luxus-Apartment, oder?
Naja, der Unterschied ist in gewisser Weise merklich, aber hauptsächlich aufgrund der neueren Technologie, die sich hinter all diesen Wänden verbirgt. Von den Abmessungen her ist dieses Service-Modul sehr ähnlich wie das zentrale Modul der Mir-Station. Es hat ungefähr die gleichen Abmessungen, es hat ungefähr das gleiche Gewicht, aber aufgrund der wesentlich moderneren, wie man so schön sagt, State-of-the-Art-Technologie ist natürlich die gesamte Funktion wesentlich verbessert. Es gibt eine unglaubliche Kapazität an Datenverarbeitungsmöglichkeiten. Die Lebenserhaltungssysteme wurden verbessert und damit natürlich sichergestellt, dass die Crew, die dann im Ende Oktober, Anfang November hochgehen wird, dort effektiv ihre Arbeit aufnehmen kann.
Und haben Sie vielleicht noch einen Verbesserungsvorschlag? Was fehlt Ihnen? Vielleicht so eine intergalaktische Espressomaschine?
Das wäre natürlich eine Sache, eine Herausforderung vielleicht für die Leute, die sich mit sowas beschäftigen, vielleicht mal eine Espressomaschine für den Weltraum herzustellen. Aber ich muss sagen, ich selbst konzentriere mich natürlich auch in der Vorbereitung für eine derartige Mission auf die Verbesserung und die effektive Gestaltung von Systemen, die wir dann zur Durchführung von Forschungsarbeiten gebrauchen. Denn das ist der Hauptzweck dieser internationalen Raumstation, in umfangreichem Maße wissenschaftliche Forschung in all den verschiedenen Gebieten zu betreiben.
Haben Sie denn auch schon ein Ticket für ISS gebucht? Fliegen Sie da auch hoch?
Also ich will mal so sagen, ich habe die Option drauf, wie 15 meiner europäischen Kollegen. Wann das genau sein wird, kann ich im Moment noch nicht sagen. Aber dass dieser Moment kommen wird, das ist eigentlich ziemlich sicher.
Ja, dann wünsche ich Ihnen toi toi toi, alles Gute. Was sagt man denn da in der Astronautensprache? Mast- und Schotenbruch würde man bei einem Schiff sagen. Wie ist es im Raumschiff?
Man sagt eigentlich auch alles Gute. Es ist nicht so wie in der Fliegerei, wo man sagt Hals- und Beinbruch, habe ich zumindest in der Raumfahrt noch nicht gehört.
Alles Gute, Thomas Reiter, unser Major Tom. Tschüss nach Nordweg.
Herzlichen Dank. Tschüss.
Es hat ein Arbeitszimmer, Schlafkojen und es hat ein, wenn auch enges, Bad. Die Rede ist nicht von einem Appartement, sondern vom Servicemodul Zvezda für die Raumstation ISS. Mit einer Verspätung von fast 2 Jahren ist das Element nun auf dem Weg zu seiner Position im All.
Pünktlich um 10:56 Uhr Ortszeit. Die Trägerrakete Proton K hebt ab. Ein Bilderbuchstart mitten in der Steppe Kasachstans. Für die Russen ein großer Erfolg, denn bis zuletzt hatten sie an der fehlerfreien Zündung gezweifelt. An Bord der Rakete fliegt das russische Modul Zvezda, zu Deutsch der Stern. Abgekoppelt kreist Zvezda nun allein auf seiner Umlaufbahn. Wenn alles planmäßig läuft, sagt Wladimir Lobatschew, Chef der russischen Kontrollmission, dann dockt unser Modul in 2 Wochen an der Raumstation an. Wenn was schief läuft, dann gibt es auch keinen Ersatz und wir werden wieder um Jahre zurückgeworfen. Ursprünglich war der Start 1998 geplant, aber der russischen Regierung fehlte schlicht das Geld. Über 300 Millionen Dollar kostet das Modul. Zwar brachte diese exklusive Pizza-Werbung 1 Million ein, doch das reicht quasi nur für das Porto von Zvezda, das in der Raumstation als Wohnbereich eine zentrale Bedeutung hat.
Erst wenn das Service-Modul im Orbit ist, wird die erste Crew am 30. Oktober starten. Und von da an ist die Station bemannt und sie wird eben weitergebaut, aber sie ist bemannt und wird benutzt. Und das ist wichtig.
Seit heute ist auch der zentrale Bordcomputer der Raumstation im All. In Bremen entwickelt, gilt er als das Gehirn der ISS und der wichtigste Baustein der Europäer an dem internationalen Projekt.
Vom Weltraumbahnhof in Baikonur startet das russische Wohn- und Servicemodul Zvezda ins All. Bei der Herstellung des Bauteils war es aufgrund finanzieller Probleme immer wieder zu Verzögerungen gekommen. Mit dem heutigen Start geht die Montage im All in die heiße Phase.
So soll es in 5 Jahren über der Erde schweben. Das bislang größte Projekt der Raumfahrtgeschichte. Über 100 Meter lang, mehr als 400 Tonnen schwer. Die internationale Raumstation ISS. 16 Staaten sind beteiligt. Die Kosten werden auf bis zu 200 Milliarden Mark geschätzt. Das teuerste Labor aller Zeiten ist ausgestattet mit Schlaf- und Aufenthaltsräumen für bis zu 7 Wissenschaftler. Die ersten Module für die Raumstation wurden vor 2 Jahren in die Umlaufbahn geschossen. An sie sollen jetzt die weiteren Einheiten gekoppelt werden. 2005 soll die ISS dann ihre Arbeit aufnehmen.
Einer der interessantesten Bereiche ist die Medizin. Man wird maßgeschneiderte Medikamente entwickeln können aufgrund des Know-hows, das man in der Raumstation gewinnt. Ein weiterer Bereich ist die Telemedizin. Die Astronauten werden mit Sensoren bestückt, damit man ihre Körperfunktionen überprüft. Diese Technologie drahtlos kann man Risikopatienten auf der Erde zugutekommen lassen. Ein weiterer Bereich sind neue Materialien, leichtere Werkstoffe für Autos, für Flugzeuge, um damit weniger Treibstoff zu verbringen und letztlich damit auch die Umwelt zu schützen.
So sollen in der Schwerelosigkeit zum Beispiel Kristalle gezüchtet werden, deren Reinheit und Struktur bislang unerreicht sind. Grundlagenforschung für Medizin und Computertechnik. Die Ausbildung der Astronauten ist bereits im vollen Gang. Jeder der am Projekt beteiligten Nationen will in den kommenden Jahren Wissenschaftler in die Umlaufbahn schicken. Trainiert werden momentan die Astronauten, die die Station zusammenbauen sollen. Mit dicken Raumanzügen und Handschuhen, filigrane Montagearbeit in der Schwerelosigkeit. Jeder Fehlgriff würde Millionen kosten.
Natürlich ist es technisch eine riesige Herausforderung und für mich als Geisteswissenschaftler ist es jeden Tag erneut beeindruckend, wie fantastisch die Ingenieure arbeiten und wie man wirklich aus mehreren Kontinenten, die Russen sind beteiligt, die Kanadier, die Japaner, die Amerikaner und 10 europäische Staaten, wie man sicherstellt, dass die Schraube, die auf einem Erdteil gefertigt wird, in der richtigen Qualität zum richtigen Zeitpunkt am anderen Ende der Welt ist, um integriert zu werden.
Der deutsche Beitrag dazu ist erheblich. Mit rund 2 Milliarden Mark beteiligt sich die Bundesrepublik unter anderem am europäischen Columbus-Modul. Ein weiterer Beitrag ist die Entwicklung des X-38. Für den Raumgleiter liefern deutsche Ingenieure tragende Elemente und die Bedienungssoftware. Der X-38 soll später an die Raumstation gekoppelt werden. Er dient den Astronauten bei Notfällen als Rettungskapsel. Die Hoffnung der Entwickler jedoch ist, dass das Rettungsboot niemals zum Einsatz kommt. Denn die Raumstation ISS soll nach den höchsten Sicherheitskriterien gebaut werden.
Nach jetziger Planung geht man von einer Lebenszeit von 12 bis 15 Jahren aus. 2004 wird die Station komplett integriert sein, sodass man dann 12 bis 15 Jahre rechnen kann. Aber bisher haben wir in Europa Produkte geliefert, die eigentlich ihre Lebenszeit weit übertroffen haben. Also es ist nicht auszuschließen, dass es vielleicht sogar 20 Jahre geht.
Und so wächst fast 400 Kilometer über der Erde das Labor der Zukunft. Die Nachfrage aus der freien Wirtschaft ist groß. Sämtliche Module sind für die ersten Jahre bereits ausgebucht.
Für umgerechnet 120 Milliarden D-Mark ist Zvezda das wohl teuerste Wohnmobil unserer Galaxie. Vera Stör fasst zusammen.
6:56 Uhr, Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur, Kasachstan. Gebannt blicken Techniker und Journalisten im Kontrollzentrum auf die Monitore. Dann der Countdown.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And we have liftoff.
Zvezda, zu Deutsch Stern, ist auf dem Weg ins All zur internationalen Raumstation ISS. Auf der war die Aussicht schon immer einzigartig, der Wohnkomfort aber eher mittelmäßig. Eng war es bislang auf der Raumstation. Doch das wird sich nun ändern. Das 13 Meter lange Modul bietet den Astronauten Platz zum Schlafen und Forschen. Leere Kassen und technische Probleme verzögerten den Start von Zvezda um 2 Jahre, bis sich die nötigen Sponsoren gefunden hatten. Am 26. Juli soll der Stern an das bestehende Gerüst der Raumstation andocken. Die Eroberung des Weltraums ist dann wieder ein Stück näher gerückt. 2005 soll die Raumstation Zwischenstopp für die Reise zum Mars sein.
Es soll Ende des Monats an 2 bereits im All fliegende Module andocken.
Hoffen auf himmlischen Beistand bei den einen, auf russische Technik bei den anderen. Für so wichtig wie die Mondlandung hielten Experten den heutigen Start in Baikonur, denn mit dem 3. Modul Zvezda sollte heute auch die zentrale Computersteuerung aus Deutschland zur internationalen Raumstation geschossen werden. Und dann ein Bilderbuchstart. Mit 2-jähriger Verspätung wegen russischer Finanzierungsprobleme brachte die Proton-Trägerrakete das Herzstück der Raumstation in nur 9 Minuten auf seine Umlaufbahn in fast 400 Kilometern Entfernung. Natürlich hatten wir große Angst vor Pannen, sagt der Leiter des Kontrollzentrums in Moskau, denn für Zvezda hätten wir kein anderes Modul als Ersatz gehabt. Ein Unfall heute hätte uns mit der gesamten Raumstation um Jahre zurückgeworfen. In 2 Wochen soll dann auch Zvezda an die beiden ersten Module andocken, die bereits die Erde umkreisen. Vollautomatisch. Diese Technik ist eine russische Spezialität. Falls sie dennoch fehlschlägt, steht im Baikonur eine Notcrew bereit, um hinterher zu fliegen. In die 120 Milliarden Mark teure Station die im Jahr 2004 fertig sein soll, wollen dann 16 Nationen ihre Wissenschaftler schießen, um zahllose Forschungsversuche zu starten. Darunter so bodenständige wie das weltweite Einstellen von Funkuhren oder das Sperren gestohlener Kreditkarten.